Hey everyone, what is up, and welcome back for episode 41 of Higurashi When They Cry. I do not know what episode this is of chapter 5, to be honest. Episode 4, I think. Um, so, quick little recap of last episode and what we should expect to see this episode. So, in last episode, we saw Satoshi's Watsunagashi, as in the one where he goes missing and where he almost certainly killed his aunt. And we've kind of started to see that. Obviously, his aunt is dead. Satoshi is the main suspect for Oishi. And Shion accompanied him to the toy store the day after, while clearly knowing that Satoshi did it. And Satoshi was kind of starting to get the heat on him. The police show up, and Shion finally pulls out her trump card. She's not Mion, she's Shion, and she has an alibi for Satoshi. And so this is where things are going to get interesting, because not only are we sitting here when is this presumably fabricated killer going to show up, right? The one who claims responsibility and then dies by swallowing a fork. When do they show up? And also, what's going to happen with Shion, right? There was this kind of silent agreement that Shion was allowed to be in the Hinamizawa and Okonomiya area so long as she never made her presence as Shion publicly known. It seemed like a silent agreement with Oryu. Now we know that she's kind of just able to operate on her own eventually, so maybe there's going to be some kind of thing where maybe the fact that she was sticking up for a Hinamizawan, right, in their time of need, maybe Oryu's going to be like, you know what? You're a true Hinamizawan. You can do what you want, right? Or maybe it's not going to be like that at all, and Shion's going to have to fight for that kind of what seems like freedom that she gets. Or maybe maybe she never got her freedom, and Oryu just didn't know. I don't know, right? Or maybe she gets more indoctrinated into the Sonozaki life, and maybe that's something to keep in mind, right? There's lots of ways this could go, right? Maybe she seems free in the question arcs, but she's really not at all, right? And she's more a part of the Sonozaki family than she was before. All of these possibilities are pretty interesting, and I'm intrigued to see where they're going to go with that. So I think that's two big things that I'm really looking to see, presumably in this episode. Maybe not this one directly, but I imagine we'll see some stuff on those soon. So anyways, let's go ahead and jump into it. Oh, I thought I didn't even save. That would have been awkward. Let's go ahead and jump right into it. The cops were smart enough to separate us during questioning. Oishi didn't come to talk to me. His aim was Satoshi-kun and nobody else. I got a young cop who just talked about ordinary things. He must have been trying to ease me into the interrogation. When I realized that, the clumsy way he spoke began to frustrate me. Is Satoshi-kun really alright? I didn't think Oishi really bought my testimony. He must have been trying to get Satoshi-kun to confess in spite of that. All I could do was pray that he'd keep quiet. What, did we get Kumagai? Yeah. It's kind of interesting. What if she ends up with a grudge against him? I'm just saying, bro did go missing in chapter 3. I'm just saying. The phone on the desk rang, and the cop picked it up.
Hi, Kumagai desu. Hi? ああ、そうですか。わかりました。すぐに。
He hung up and told me somebody had come to retrieve me. I had a feeling that was coming. Looked like Satoshi-kun had to stay. Are they going to continue the interrogation just because he had nobody to pick him up? Although, maybe I should have been worrying more about myself. The hag had probably heard about me by now, since I revealed my real identity to the police. I couldn't hide any longer. I was going to receive some sort of punishment. I had no idea what she'd end up doing to me. The degree of punishment for a traitor is always severe in the world of the Sonozakis. The punishment must be carried out. If it's to protect the family's reputation, it's carried out no matter what. Maybe I should kiss my pinky finger while I still can. I asked the young cop just in case.
ねえねえ、アメリカなんかでよく死刑囚が死刑廃止の州で捕まると引き渡さないでくれるっていう話あるじゃないですか。
Okay, I mean, that makes sense. So what's her point? You guys are going to treat me better than the Sonozaki, so you shouldn't release me?
Hmm?
Maybe it was too difficult for him. He just looked puzzled. The glossy black car was waiting for me in front of the police station. A few men from my dad's office bowed to me.
シオンさん、ご無沙汰しております。
Uh-oh.
ダサイは
Gasai had been helping me ever since my escape from the school. They wouldn't allow him to walk free.
お姉はどうしてるの？何か言ってる？
私たちはシオンさんを本家へお連れしろとしか言われていませんので。
Ooh, this is not what we wanted to see, most likely.
詳しくは本家でお尋ねになってください。
After saying that, he escorted me into the car. A man sat on either side of me. Obviously, they didn't want me to escape. Thinking of Satoshi-kun, I looked back at the police station. Hold on tight, Satoshi-kun. I'll grin and bear it, too. The car started off roughly. There was never a good occasion when I went to this house. Except when Mion and I were really small, oblivious of what the Sonozaki name meant for us. I'd been here only when I had to attend boring family councils. The car parked behind the house. Traders aren't allowed in through the main gate. Ugh. Yeah, that's not a good sign, huh? I got out of the car. It looked like Sis would be the only person to receive me. I thought they were going to say it wouldn't. I almost spoke to her casually, but her cold gaze froze me before I could.
お久しぶりですね、シオン。新年以外に会えるとは思いませんでした。
As to pretend she had no knowledge. It gave me the chills to hear her greet me in that cold manner.
ミオン姉様こそ、ご機嫌麗しゅうございます。
Having to throw in the sama is rough.
新年以外にお顔が見れて、3問くらいの得を感じます。
I responded, trying to sound likewise.
当主は大変ご立腹ですよ。どう釈明されるか見ものです。私がするような釈明なんて別にないですし。
I had no excuse. I'd escaped from the school solely because I couldn't stand it there. That was all.
シオン、来なさい。皆待っています。
This might get ugly. Mion escorted me, and the others followed. We went to the garden, not into the house. Ooh, yikes. As we passed through the huge yard into the woods, I realized where she was taking me. When we were little, we were told never to go near these woods. I had a vague idea of what was in the back of them. I'd heard there was a hidden entrance to the underground torture room where they used to punish the enemies of the family. The more hideous rumors I heard about the family, the more credible those rumors seemed. Well, I wasn't completely certain about any of that. I never expected to see the torture room for myself. We came to a concave clearing in the middle of the woods. I saw a metal door at the bottom of it. The door reminded me of a bomb shelter.
これが噂の地下拷問室ってやつですね。
I was surprised to hear my own voice. My voice was trembling. It made me realize that I was more scared than I thought. Nobody answered my question. The very air felt tense. According to the family rules, one of the twins must be eliminated. Was I finally going to be eliminated? I realized I had been underestimating my punishment. I hadn't been aware of the real terror until now. I just thought I was. Beyond the steel door, the air had an intimidating smell. This really was happening to me. I shouldn't allow myself to give in to fear. I felt like saying something rude, but my lips were dry, and my fingers were fidgeting. I was escorted through the narrow hallway and down a few sets of stairs. I'm really, really curious to see how this plays out. Because this could impact a lot. Like, I mean, if she gets tortured and Mion just kind of let it happen, maybe it explains chapter 2, right? Just as an example. There, I saw another huge steel door. So this was the place. It was spacious and a spacious and utterly odd-looking room. The room had two sections that looked completely different. Our side looked like a lounge. I saw several high-ranking members of the family council sitting on cushions there, looking expressionless. The other half was tiled, as if in a large public bath. That was already puzzling enough. That is the game, right? Not my mic? Okay. That was already puzzling enough, and there were those things. To be honest, they had captured my attention from the moment I arrived. I noticed them even before I saw the lounge and tiled space. I just didn't want to accept that they existed. I couldn't stand straight. I almost dropped to my knees, but I couldn't. Two young men had been holding me by the arm since I got here. There were oddly shaped things hanging from the wall. I was just refusing to recognize what they were. I knew exactly what they were called. I see. I understood that those eerily shaped objects were torture devices from hell.
だほがどの面下げて戻ってきた思うとっとと。
The hag, sitting at the front of the lounge, intimidated me in a horrid voice. She kept cursing me for a little while, but she was so incensed that I could barely tell what she was saying. It's starting to look to me like we're about to get the Sonozaki... or like she gets punished by the Sonozakis and kind of is forced to help them in the future, which makes you maybe reconsider some of her actions in the future. Sorry, this is all stuff that can be said later. Let's not ruin the tension of this scene. I knew what she was trying to say, though. The hag was willing to forgive my escape from the school, but once I revealed my identity to the police, she had to step in. Since I disobeyed the family rule, she, as the leader, was forced to punish me. Moreover, there was one thing that bothered her more than anything else. The fact that I covered for Satoshi-kun. Really? Oh, that's a good point. I guess they don't just see him as a Hinamizawa, they see him as a Hojo. The Hojo family had been seen as traitors to the village ever since the dam conflict. Satoshi-kun is still considered one of them. She couldn't accept that I was connected to him. To me, this was a bit unexpected. I'd escaped from the school the hag had put me in. All the while, I'd believed that was what she was upset about. But in fact, she said that she was the most uncomfortable with my connection with Satoshi-kun. I couldn't believe this. Of course, I knew that Satoshi-kun's family was persecuted for their betrayal, but I didn't think that Satoshi-kun was also burdened with that responsibility.
そんなのサトシ君関係ないじゃないですか。サトシ君の親はわかるとしても、サトシ君個人には何の責任もな。
しゃあらしいわ。
I was gonna say, talking back to Oryu is a bold move. The hag interrupted me with a shout, which made me cower in fear. She continued slandering the Hojos and said that Satoshi-kun was a cursed child. I started feeling pissed off. What did he do to deserve this? What was he being blamed for? It was too late when I realized I'd said that out loud. The hag looked furious. I'd obviously upset her. I decided to repeat myself to make it very clear how I felt.
鬼ババ、あんた何言ってんの？
Oh, snap.
黙って聞いてれば言いたい放題。
Goodness, that... Ooh, getting bold with Oryu is that's quite a move.
なんばねすったら口の利き。
やかましい！しまいまで聞きなよ、鬼ババ！
Oh my god. I shouted loudly to silence the
だい
hag.
たいあんたはサトシ君の何を知ってるの？サトシ君のことをよく知りもしないくせに、まるで彼を害虫みたいに言い捨てて。サトシ君がどんなにいい人か私はよく知っている。彼が北条だからいけないの？バッカみたい。時代錯誤も甚だしい。その先の私が北条のサトシ君と一緒にいたのがそんなにも不愉快なの？くったらないくったらないバッカみたい。こんな安っぽいロミジュリを自分で体験できるなんて思わなかったな。
Oh my god, Shion has some real problems with managing her anger. I will say that right now. And it puts her in some rough spots, because I'm sure Oryu is certainly not going to lighten up on the punishment as a result of that. My voice became hoarse from shouting. My face was messy with tears. Even so, I didn't feel like putting a stop to my emotional explosion. I was all too aware that I was doing this just to overwhelm my fear. The hag was glaring at me while breathing heavily. I glared back at her as fiercely as I could. Eventually, I realized that her sticking point was my relationship with Satoshi-kun. She wasn't only upset that I had a mere connection with him.
そっか。ミオンがそういう告げ口をしたわけか。
It was as though Mion was wearing a mask. She didn't budge under my penetrating glare. That was what the hag was really unhappy about. The fact that I was in love with Satoshi-kun.
確かに私、自分が園崎家だとか、サトシ君が北条家だとか、認めますよ、認めます。私は北条サトシ君が好きです。彼のことが大好きです。
Oh my god.
それっていけないこと？人が人を好きになるのに何か理由が必要？
I could see the relatives shaking their heads in turmoil. Among them, I saw my mom. She must have been trying to protect me, but even she wouldn't look at me. Instead, she looked silently at the floor.
後ろのあんたたちも聞こえてるでしょ？私おかしいこと言ってる？あんたたちだってサトシ君をよく知れば、彼がどんなに素敵な男の子で私が好きになるのがおかしくないことがすぐにわかる。なのになんで相手の人格も知ろうとしないで一方的に。
Mion held out a hand to silence me. Then she slowly walked in my direction.
もう結構です、シオン。あなたの言い分と覚悟はよくわかりました。
Mion put her head close to mine and whispered.
シオンの覚悟はよくわかったよ。でもここまで言い切っちゃったら、シオンがけじめをつけてみせるしかない。けじめ？なんで私がなんでそんなバカな。シオン。
Mion's face turned cold again, and she calmly told me.
あなたの言う個人の理屈は多分正しい。でもね、あなたも理解していると思うけど、ここはひなみ沢で、私たちは園崎家なの。御三家の末席で、今、そしてあなたは仮にも、園崎家次期当主である園崎美音の双子の妹。それが、
I interrupted her.
あんたとは、こっちに帰ってから、どうもそのあたりの話が食い合わないですね。
Interrupting Mio is a crazy move. I mean, it's just almost as crazy as interrupting Oryu.
大人の事情みたいなことばっか。ひなみ沢？園崎家？だから何？私はそんなの全然興味な。聞きなさい。
Mion interrupted me just like I did her.
シオンは今日まで沖宮で生活するにあたって、どれだけの人の世話になってる？
Chills shot through my spine. Man, it would have been zero if she was allowed out in public.
葛西さん、奥の牢屋にいる。なんで葛西が？
I knew why, of course. The moment I got caught, those who helped me were destined to meet the same fate. We were all subject to the punishment of betrayal. Maybe my punishment will be lighter than what they'd be going through. Kasai and Uncle Yoshiro must have been treated much worse than this. Everybody who helped me was falling victim.
シオンがどういう目にあっても、お世話になった葛西さんや吉郎おじさんがどうなるかまでは考えが及ばない。
My head rapidly cooled down. My aggression was all used up. I should be able to bear whatever punishment they'd bring on me, but I resented the fact that I'd be putting the people who supported me at risk.
シオン、ばっちゃんに謝ってけじめをつけてみせれば、シオン誰にも迷惑をかけない。
I don't know how at this point an apology would fix things, but
でもミオン、私間違ったこと言った？そんなにも悪いことした？
the moment Mion learned that I wasn't willing to apologize, her expression turned cold again. She turned her back to me and returned to the lounge. I talked back to the hag in a really harsh manner. I told her that I didn't do anything wrong, yet I had involved many people to who I owed so much. Well, without saying, this was my responsibility. I was the sole person to blame, and no fault lay with them. Yes, Kasai and Yoshiro-san were blameless, just as Satoshi-kun was. But then, as if she read my mind, Mion turned around and gave a slight nod. It was possible that something was going to happen to Satoshi-kun, on top of Kasai and Uncle Yoshiro. Does that explain things? That can't happen. Satoshi-kun, I mean, nobody else should be punished. Please forgive them.
何ですか、シオン。
Tears rolled down my cheeks. I no longer cared about my pride.
ごめんなさい。私が間違っていました。許してください、当主様。
I should have said what the hag wanted to hear. Yet she still looked unsatisfied. Maybe that wasn't too surprising. I had just denounced her so badly in front of the relatives. She wouldn't forgive me so easily. Just then, Mion spoke as the successor.
ではシオン、どうやってけじめをつけるつもりです？けじめってどうすれば？
Nothing could be scarier than being told to pay up while standing next to horrid-looking torture devices. I was completely terrified. I couldn't move from trembling. Mion saw them whisper to our grandmother. The hag nodded. Mion summoned some young minions and gave them an order. They removed one of the torture devices hanging on the wall, and set a table in front of me and put the device on top of it.
何これ？爪を剥ぐための道具です。
Ugh.
使い方はわかります？わかるわけないでしょ。
I shook as I stared at the tool. It looked like a giant nail clipper. You probably put the part that looks like a beak between your fingers and fingernail, pulling them apart if you squeezed the handle. The chills ran up and down my spine when I imagined that.
爪1枚ずつでシオンがかけた迷惑のそれぞれのけじめとします。園崎シオン、どの指でも構いません。自らの手で3枚の爪を剥がしてみせなさい。
3. One for Kasai, one for Uncle Yoshiro, and the last for Satoshi-kun. It was a fairly reasonable number.
本当にそれで他の人は許してくれるんですか？約束して。私がちゃんと自分の爪を剥げたら他のみんなは許すと約束して。これはあなたのけじめであって取引ではありませんよ。この方法が気に入らないなら。やるから待って、待ってよ。やるから、やるから。
You know, I must say, pretty reasonable reason to hold a grudge, if I do say so myself. I put the device to my little finger while shaking badly. If my fingernail were shorter, it would have been harder. The metal beak captured my little finger beautifully. The subordinates then stabilized my left hand with a different restraining tool. That seemed reasonable, because my finger would slip out if it weren't restrained like that. As the subordinates buckled up the leather straps, I realized that this was really happening, and there was no escape. Somewhere in my mind, I'd been thinking that they might forgive me after just the gesture alone. Yeah, maybe not. I shouldn't have been so naive. The emotions I'd been holding back appeared in the form of tears and kept rolling down my cheeks. It was like my feelings were being squeezed out until the very last drip. Something even more horrifying followed this. It was the silence that awaited my next action.
どうするの？
One of the subordinates pointed to the handle and told me to either squeeze it or hit it. He recommended that the latter would be easier, to make it quick. Nobody said anything after that. There was nothing to hear but the sound of my sweat dripping onto the floor. The onlookers were staring at me silently, waiting for me to execute my punishment. Both the hag and Mion. They were also anticipating it. I could refuse, but that meant I wouldn't be paying up. This punishment exists to offer payment in exchange for the safety of those who helped me. If I refused, they would suffer. I started breathing heavily. I knew that if I did this, the others would go free. This was, if you thought about it, quite a good deal. If it weren't me, it wouldn't just be 3 fingernails. If it were Kasai, he'd have to sacrifice his little finger, or something even worse. I knew that. It was my selfish desire to get away from that school. Why did Kasai have to suffer because of that? I knew that. Why did Uncle Yoshiro have to suffer just because he provided me with a job? I knew that the hag and the other relatives still hated the Hojos, so I didn't know what they'd do to Satoshi-kun if I didn't do this. Would they bring Satoshi-kun here and tell him to do the same? Would they tell him to remove his fingernails in exchange for forgiving me? He'd do it. He'd sacrifice himself with no hesitation in order to save others. My sweat dripped onto the table through my nose. I'd do it, yes. It was only 3 fingernails. It might hurt a lot, but I wouldn't die. The fingernails would grow back. It wouldn't even leave a huge scar. I shouldn't be afraid. The punishment was minimal because it was me. If I refused to do this, the others would be punished much more severely. I couldn't let that happen to Kasai, Uncle Yoshiro, or Satoshi-kun. I was the only one who should be punished. So I just needed to bear the pain. Here it goes, I'm guessing. No, here soon. I wasn't just breathing heavily anymore. I was also moaning faintly, ready to scream at any moment. That's right, make it quick. This wasn't torture, so I didn't have to prolong the moment of pain. I should do it in one swift blow. That way, my pain and fear would be minimized. I raised my right arm. Quickly. The pain would be lessened if I did it in one stroke. It'd be much more painful if I messed it up. Oh, that's a horrifying thought. Please don't mess it up. I held my breath. I felt as if my body was frozen. I was choking. The chills crept up my spine. Don't be afraid, Shion. Fingernails are just a tiny fraction of the whole body. Just 1 square centimeter. I could do this. I could bear it. I smacked my right hand onto the handle of the device. I sensed the noise through my body instead of through my ears. At the same time, I felt a pain I'd never experienced before. A moment later, the pain pulsated with my heartbeat. I clenched my teeth. I felt like my teeth were cracking. I tightly shut my eyes until my eyeballs got squeezed up. The pain wouldn't fade. Rather, it swelled with my blood pressure. I felt as though it was bloating like a balloon. Timidly, I opened my eyes. I found that my little finger wasn't really drenched in blood. It was bleeding, but not much. Certainly not enough to explain how much it hurt. My fingernail was open just like the hood of a car. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. It was overwhelming. It occurred to me that I'd only done 1 out of 3. Did I have to repeat this 2 more times? Did I have to remove the nails from my ring and middle fingers as well? Ugh. I looked at the hag and at Mion, begging for mercy. You are going to find none. But they were just silently staring at me, as if the show had only just begun. I saw no hint of mercy in their eyes. They wouldn't be changing their minds. Since they said 3, it had to be 3. They wouldn't forgive me until I removed 2 more fingernails.
いいよこれで許して
No. No, it will not be.
あのねこれ本当に痛いのすごく痛いんだよ私の顔を見ればわかるよね本当にさ痛くて
Mion answered, still wearing a cold look.
シオンもう無理
She didn't mean that it was sufficient. What she meant is that the others would have to take the remaining punishment if I didn't. I knew that. I really did know.
やれるよこんなの全然楽勝だってこのサディストどもがこんなの怖くないこんなの痛くない
She went for another one. I quickly moved the metal beak and set it on my ring finger, and smacked it with no hesitation. Instead of making it quick, maybe I was just rushing out of fear. I'd messed up. The torture tool had clipped just the tip of my fingernail. The pain, however, was equal. I couldn't believe I'd only chipped it. Did I have to do it again? Did I have to continue removing the nail from my ring finger? That much pain again? Again?
シオン
やだ
I couldn't bear it anymore. I started crying shamelessly.
もうやだやだもう無理なの本当に痛いのもう許して本当に許してよごめんなさいごめんなさい謝りますから許してくださいごめんなさいごめんなさいごめんなさいごめんなさいごめんなさい
They didn't seem to hear my voice. It felt as though there was an invisible barrier between us. They showed no mercy. They were just here to witness this ritual. So rather than sympathetic, they looked amazed by my screw-up. Mion walked up to me and whispered to my crying face.
シオンあとちょっとだから頑張って
Bro, I'm not gonna lie, if I'm Shion in this position, you might catch me pulling a chapter 2. Like, I'm just saying, it might happen, right?
やだやだやだやだ本当に無理本当に痛いの痛いの
This is hard to sit through. Mion shook her head, then signaled the subordinates. They came from behind me. What, are they gonna do it now? They covered my head with something like a knit cap. It was a blindfold. One of them pinned me in a Nelson hold, restricting my movement.
やめてよやめてよいや
I couldn't overpower the guy behind me. Then I felt something strange on my left hand. The other guy was doing something with the torture tool. He put the metal beak between my ring finger and its fingernail. I'm just saying, if I'm in Shion's position, I don't know if I can ever forgive Mion after this. Even if I know it's kind of what she felt she had to do, I don't know if I could ever forgive this. My left hand was fixed in the restraint, so I couldn't put up much protest anyway. But even that left hand was pressed down by his rough palms until it hurt, robbing it of the freedom even to tremble. They had no hesitation. It was made very clear to me how merciless people could be. Robbed of my vision, all I could do was clench my teeth against the pain assailing me. If there was anything I was thankful for, it was that he was well practiced and had ripped off both of my fingernails cleanly. Yeah, thank God we got a guy who's well practiced in the art of ripping off fingernails, am I right? Pain and screaming might induce narcotic chemicals in the brain. While screaming, I started losing consciousness. Probably weren't breathing. Okay, there was the punishment. So does this, buy her freedom? Is she going to have to take orders from the Sonozakis here? And that's what I'm interested in now. I mean, the punishment was bad enough. I woke up. My memories were missing. I couldn't remember how I got back to my room. I held my head with both hands. My left hand was bandaged. The fingers that had their nails removed had swollen like hot dogs. I'd paid with those 3 fingernails for what I did. The hag had said something after the punishment, but I didn't remember any of it. I was taken to a hospital in Okonomiya. The car shook in the way, adding extra pain on top of what I already felt. Somebody gave me some aspirin. They worked just like they said on TV, but they didn't last more than 10 minutes. I swallowed the pills without water. While I was spacing out in the waiting lounge, is it going to be Irie? Kasai showing up makes sense. Kasai showed up. He probably came to check if I was alright. I obviously wasn't. He must have understood that from my bandaged left arm dangling from my shoulder. Kasai, on the other hand, looked just fine. At least on the outside. I was relieved that my sacrifice had meant something. Kasai didn't say anything. I couldn't tell if he wanted to tell me something or not, because he looked so emotionless.
Kasai?
なんでしょ
He paused shortly before answering. I could tell he was upset. I didn't regret revealing my true identity in order to protect Satoshi-kun, but I hadn't wanted Kasai or Uncle Yoshiro to be hurt. I'd been contradicting myself.
吉郎おじさんはどうなったか知ってます？
ういいえ。したたかな方です。ご無事と思います。後で謝られた方がいいでしょう。
I wanted to ask him about Satoshi-kun too. I wondered if he was captured or harassed by the Sonozaki family because of me. But I was hesitant to ask Kasai. After all, I'd chosen Satoshi-kun over them. Was Satoshi-kun alright? I hoped he wouldn't get caught or incarcerated somewhere. In fact, the exact opposite will happen. I paid the hospital bill and Kasai gave me a ride home. I finally realized that somebody was knocking on my door.
シオンさん、横になり続けるのも、やはり体に毒です。
It was Kasai. He put some side dishes on the table and we started nibbling at them.
気分は落ち着かれましたか？
落ち着いたというか、
この数日間はずっと伏せっていたんですか？
Sounds like she's been resting a lot.
食事はされていましたか？
Probably not.
冷蔵庫の中の残り物を適当に食べてました。
Never mind. Let Shion cook.
あとは天井を見てるか眠っているかのどっちか。
It had been 3 days. I'd just been lying down since then. Oh, Satoshi's probably gone at this point. You're never going to see him again. I woke up every now and then in my shallow sleep, but I didn't feel like getting up or thinking. I felt like I'd just been floating the whole time. My appetite was gone, but it came back with the smell of the food Kasai brought. I wasn't able to think of anything to talk to Kasai about, so I just ate silently.
昨日、ミオンさんから連絡がありました。シオンさんの部屋に何度か電話したけど、出なかったからということで。
Like she wants to pick up a call from Mion right now. The moment I heard Mion's name, I felt my wounds throb. I didn't stop Kasai, who continued.
園崎本家としては、シオンさんがご自分でけじめをつけられたので、あの学園には退学届が出されます。 シオンさんは沖宮の学校に編入になるそうです。
園崎シオンの人権が認められたってことか。
そうですね。今後は園崎シオンとして生活してくださって構わないそうです。
What are the conditions?
ですが、みだりにひなみ沢には近づかないこと。園崎ミオンを語らないこと。人前にみだりに姿を現さないこと。
It means nothing changes.
他にも細々とありますが、つまるところ、
存在を認めてやるから本家に目立つようなことは二度とするなってわけか。
Can't show up in public places still? That means nothing changes, right? Like, am I crazy? That was the deal. That was basically the deal before.
そういうことになります。もちろん永続的なわけじゃありません。ほとぼりが冷めるまで当分ということです。
Okay.
具体的にいつまでという期限があるわけではありませんが、今年いっぱいくらいはこれまで通り目立たない生活を送られた方がよろしいかと思います。
私は沖宮でひっそり暮らすだけで十分です。もともとこれまでだってそうして暮らしてきたわけだし。
Kasai put on a sad smile. I smiled back at him likewise. Before the conversation ended, I should ask him what I wanted to know.
サトシ君はどうなったの？
Yeah, he's gone, bro. I wish that Kasai would assure me of his safety right away, but he didn't answer like that.
葛西、サトシ君は無事なの？
シオンさん、
Kasai put his chopsticks down.
本家から北条聡君のことは忘れろとことづかっています。
Be for real right now, Kasai.
何それ？
シオンさん、あなたと喧嘩はしたくないんで、これ以上この話はしたくありません。本家からの言葉を伝えるのみにとどめさせてもらいます。
何？その話をしたくないってのは。葛西！
Kasai pretended as though he didn't hear me and started eating again. I had never seen him get so stubborn like this. Might be one of those things where it's just better if you don't hear it. The Sonozaki family had been using the Hojo family as a scapegoat. They must have concluded that a Sonozaki shouldn't be in love with a Hojo. I didn't like that. Satoko's a friend of Mion's at school. Would it be okay if Satoshi-kun and I were the same gender? Anyway, if I did something conspicuous again, they might do something to him for real. Well, too late. Just like they forced me to remove my own fingernails. The Sonozaki family wouldn't hesitate. They'd torture him if need be. Maybe, if I really loved him, I should stay away. Satoshi-kun won't show up in Okinomiya unless he rejoins the Hinamizawa fighters. I'd have to pretend to be Mion if I wanted to go to Hinamizawa, but I didn't think she'd cooperate with me. Even if she did, it'd be some time down the road, even if they told me not to see him. I already had no means of doing that again. Oh, wait. Mion gave me his number a little while ago. I could call him, and maybe ask to meet with him secretly. But if I got caught again, they wouldn't cut me any slack. Should I risk it? What the hell did I even want from Satoshi-kun?
葛西、ちょっと一人になりたい。
Kasai started putting away his food in a rush, assuming that I wanted him to leave.
あ、いいの。葛西はのんびり食べてて。私がちょっと一人で散歩がしたいだけなの。
私もシオンさんと一緒に出ないと、この部屋に鍵がかけられません。
Kasai quickly put away his meal and followed me out.
あ、先に断っとくけど、別にサトシ君に会いに行くわけじゃないからね。
わかりました。
I turned around and started walking. My destination was rather pathetic, the toy store to see if the bear is gone. It was the toy store that sold the giant teddy bear. I couldn't deny that I was somewhat expecting Satoshi-kun to pass by there. I couldn't stop myself from looking at the faces of passerby who resembled him. I looked into the store's window. The teddy bear was gone.
サトシ君、おめでとう。変えたんだね。
His evil aunt had died and his wicked uncle was living with his mistress. Satoshi-kun succeeded in fulfilling his duty as a big brother by buying his little sister that huge teddy bear. There was nobody left to hurt him. He was free from his tiresome efforts. He was completely free from pain. Over time, he'd retrieve his smile, and he'd go back to being the Satoshi-kun I love. I hate to say that is not how things are going down here, but I wouldn't be there with him. I heard a car honking. I didn't think it was honking at me at first, but it was so persistent that I had to look up. The person waving at me from their car was Irie. He was waving at me all carefree, oblivious to my feelings.
園崎さん
He's probably not nearly as oblivious as you think, to be honest.
ご無沙汰していますね。あ、ひょっとしてサトシ君と待ち合わせでしたか？
いえ、そういうわけじゃないです。
そのおもちゃ屋さんのショーウィンドウはサトシ君もよく覗いていましたからね。それでてっきりサトシ君との待ち合わせか何かかなって思っちゃいまして。
いえ、たまたまここを通りかかっただけです。変えたみたいですね、サトシ君。
Yurie seemed to know about the teddy bear as well. He smiled upon seeing its empty display space.
昨日がサトコちゃんの誕生日でした。
So he's gone. Because he vanished on her birthday. Never got home.
きっとあのぬいぐるみでそれをお祝いできたと思います。
Yurie, you know damn well that didn't happen.
じゃあもうサトシ君は無茶なアルバイトに精を出さなくてもいいわけですね。
そうですね。
サトシ君ってそのひなみ沢ファイターズ退部届とか出しちゃったんですか？
そんなもの出てたんですか？私は受け取ってませんよ。
I was gonna say, I don't really think that's the thing for a sports team. You just stop showing up.
マネージャーの園崎さんは
受け取ってないです。
誰も退部届を受け取ってないならまだうちの部員ってことですね。しばらくして生活が落ち着いたらまた戻ってきてくれるんじゃないかなって思ってます。でもその時に園崎さんがいなかったらきっと悲しむだろうな。
Yurie teased me. He's a grown-up after all. He must have been trying to sound optimistic because he knew I was feeling a bit down.
園崎さんも落ち着いたらいつでもチームに帰ってきてください。
So never.
あなたがいないとやっぱり寂しいですよ。園崎さんが帰ってきてくれたらぜひ女子マネージャーの制服をメイドさんな格好にしようと思ってまして。
I burst into laughter. Yurie sure hadn't changed.
あ、そうだ。もう名乗ってもいいんだった。監督、今まで騙しててすみません。私、ミオンじゃないんです。シオンっていう双子の妹なんです。訳ありで、今までずっとミオンのふりしてきました。
双子の妹さんですか？
He was totally taken aback. I burst into laughter again. I honestly thought he would have had his suspicions.
そうです。園崎シオンと言います。園崎本家に嫌われてるんで、あまり堂々と暮らせる立場じゃないんですけどね。
知らなかったですよ。まさかミオンさんに
Oh no.
双子の妹さんがいたなんて。
He's gonna say something weird. Guaranteed.
そりゃ全
Get
く
the
同
hell
感
out of
です。
here, Oishi. Go. Go. We don't even want to hear it. I get it. Satoshi's missing. Suddenly, a loud voice interrupted us. The voice sounded mean and greasy, unlike Irie's. It was him, Oishi.
入江先生もこんにちは。先日は遅くまでありがとうございました。
いえ、何もお役に立てませんで申し訳ないです。
They were just going through the motions. It was obvious that they hated each other. Irie whispered to me.
私はもうここを離れますが、一緒に車に乗りますか？お家まで送りますよ。
Irie figured that Oishi was after me, so he's giving me a chance to slip away. Looking at Oishi's face, it was clear that his focus was on me, not Irie. He probably intended to interrogate me until my testimony broke. I was sure I could talk my way out of it, but it'd just be a waste of time.
そうですね。じゃあ監督、そろそろ行きましょうか。
ありゃ、お二人でどちらかにお出かけの途中でしたか？
ええ、チームのユース積み会用に景品を探しているところだったんです。他にも行くお店がたくさんありますので、この辺で私たちは失礼します。
Irie bowed. I followed suit. I had to admire how good he was at lying. He's a grown-up, after all. Oishi seemed to know it was a lie. But he didn't have a warrant, so he couldn't stop us. I moved to get into Irie's car.
お怪我は大丈夫なんですか？園崎シオンさん。
Yo, that's evil. I gasped when I heard that. My left hand was bandaged. It was unsightly, so I'd kept it in my pocket. There was no way Oishi could have been able to see it.
可能さえしなきゃ綺麗に治りますよ。
Oh my god. Who told him? Is there really something to my worry that he's connected with the Sonozakis?
私も子供の頃は何度か爪を剥いじゃったことがありましたがね。ほら、綺麗なもんでしょう。
Dude, does he actually have mob connections?
男の爪が綺麗でも気色悪いだけです。
Oishi scratched his head and chuckled. He's supposed to be one of the best cops at the Okonomiya PD, and he knows about the underground activities in the region. He must have heard about my payment from somewhere. I mean, okay, at the very least, we know he has an inside source to the Sonozaki, so maybe it's not as weird as... Maybe it's not as incriminating as I made it sound. I mean, the problem is, the inside source could be the fact that he's actually connected, like, in the literal sense, but based on Chapter 4, we already know he has a connection, so this isn't that much more suspicious. Still, that happened in the secret basement of the Sonozaki main house. I couldn't underestimate this guy's sources.
お見舞い。感謝感激です。じゃあ、もう行きますね。失礼します。
園崎しおんさん、私とコーヒーでも飲みに行きません？
はあ？何それ？私を口説いてんですか？
そういうことでもいいですよ。
Yo, no, that's not the response at your age bracket.
遠慮します。一日は有限。わざわざ退屈なことに費やすなんて馬鹿げてますから。
もう参ったな。じゃあこうしましょう。私とのおしゃべりが退屈になったらいつでも途中で帰っていいです。引き止めません？そういう約束でどうです？
あんたがしゃべるのは勝手ですが、私はしゃべりませんよ。それをおしゃべりと呼べるかは怪しいですが。
Yeah, I mean, there are clearly some things that Shion is not privy to right now. I wouldn't be shocked if Oishi's gonna bring some of them up and be like, hey, Satoshi went missing. You don't happen to know anything about that, do you? And she's gonna be like, huh? Missing? Like, what do you mean?
ねえ、それで結構です。シオンさんは聞き役で結構です。私が勝手に一方的に喋るだけ。あなたはコーヒーでも飲みながら中年親父の独り言を聞き流してくださればそれで結構です。
He was being strangely persistent. It didn't look like he was trying to poke a hole in my statement. What would he even talk about? I got a bit curious, even though I was still skeptical.
監督、すみません。私、ちょっと大石のおじさまとデートに行こうと思います。
You're gonna hear some things you really don't like.
ミオじゃない。シオンさん？
I winked at him and told him not to worry. Irie didn't insist. He got in his car and drove off. Oishi backed his car up so I could get in. I hopped in the back seat since I didn't want to sit next to him. Yeah, real for that one.
本当に喫茶店に行くの？
あなたの親類の目がない喫茶店があるなら紹介してもらえると助かるんですがね。
それなら勝手に連行でも何でもすればいい。
Oishi carefully checked for oncoming traffic and then started driving. Oishi took me to the police station, as I thought he might. If he had taken me to a nice cafe, he would have scored some points. But whatever. You literally just... he asked you what cafe wasn't connected to the Sonozakis. Like, you could have just given him an answer.
書の方が都合がいいと思ったから書にしただけです。私の話が退屈になったら帰っていいという約束はもちろん守りますから安心してください。
私を退屈させないように頑張ってくださいな。
How long before he starts with the bombshell of Satoshi is missing?
署内には腕組んで入ってあげましょうか、おじさま。
Oishi chuckled and got out of the car. He escorted me inside the station. I thought he'd take me to an interrogation room, but instead he took me to an office of the investigation division. Officers in both suits and uniforms were working at their desks, answering phones. There was a desk with a plate that said Section Manager, and nearby there were couches and a table. Oishi told me to sit on the couch and started making some instant coffee. I had never been to this part of the police station. I looked around in curiosity.
まさか取調室でカツ丼でも食わされると思いました？
Yes, that's exactly what she thought. Oishi brought over a tray with coffee cups on it.
想像してたより待遇が良くて驚いてます。三角木馬くらいは覚悟してたのに。
そういうのは私の趣味じゃないな。
What?
で、おしゃべりを聞かせてくれるんじゃなかったでしたっけ？
じゃあ最初からいきなり単刀直入に。
Here it comes.
シオンさんって北条聡さんのこと好き？
That's not what I expected.
はあ？速攻退屈なんで即帰りますよ。
なじゃあ今のはなしということで。
Because he's missing. Oishi must have known why I had to remove my fingernails. He wasn't trying to confirm that I liked Satoshi-kun. What he was really saying was that he knew already.
サトシ君の事件当日のアリバイなら先日熊谷刑事さんに全部お話ししたつもりです。
もちろん私も熊谷君の調書は読んでます。あなたがサトシ君と一緒にいたことは知ってます。
何度聞かれたって同じ話しかしませんよ私。しつこく反復して聞いたらそのうちにボロを出すとか考えてるなら大甘もいいと。
まさかそんなこと考えてません。あなたは頭のいい人です。そんな手に引っかかるなんて思っちゃいません。
ならどういう手を考えてるやら。どちらにせよ私からサトシ君のことを何か聞き出そうとしても先日お話しした以上のことは何もありません。ああ残念。やっぱり退屈な話でしたね。
How long until he drops the bombshell?
私帰らせてもらいます。そういう約束でしたからね。失礼します。
I got up off the couch. It's gonna happen
シオ
now.
ンさん、確かに私はあなたからサトシさんのアリバイを聞こうと思っていました。それは認めますよ。
なら決まりです。やっぱり退屈でした。帰ります。
I turned around and started walking. Here it comes, surely. Oishi didn't get anxious, but instead spoke a little louder.
でもね、シオンさん、私が聞きたいのはサトシさんの事件当日のアリバイじゃない。昨日のアリバイなんです。
昨日？なんで昨日のアリバイなんかが聞かれるんですか？昨日のサトシ君のアリバイがおばさんが殺された事件とどう関係があるってんです？
He's about to successfully draw her in, I think. Because he's
昨
missing.
日、
Yep.
サトシ君が出かけたまま失踪されたからです。
What? Yep.
サトシ君が失踪されたことはご存知なかった？
I couldn't say anything, but my expression answered Oishi's question anyway.
どういうことですか？失踪って何？
やっぱり座ったらどうです？
サトシ君が失踪したって何？
一つ確実に分かっていることは、彼が3時前に沖宮の郵便局で貯金を全額下ろしているということだけです。その後の足取りはつかめません。
I knew why he withdrew that money. He wanted to buy Satoko's birthday present. Yes, he definitely bought that teddy bear yesterday.
これは私の想像ですよ。彼はひょっとしてそのお金でどっか遠くに蒸発したんじゃないかなって。
If he did, then someone else bought the teddy bear. Could Irie have done it?
逃走資金だってんですか？バッカバカしい。あのお金はね、サトコの誕生日プレゼントを買うためにサトシ君が貯めていたんです。それであのおもちゃ屋にあったでかくて高いぬいぐるみを買ったんです。逃走に使うお金になんかなるわけないです。
確かにあのおもちゃ屋から一番高いぬいぐるみが売れていました。でもね、それをサトシ君が買った確証が取れないんです。
店の人に聞けばそんなのわかりますって。私とサトシ君で買う予約までしてるんですから。
I had a bad feeling. That old man who was watching that store was sleeping when we were there. He'd looked very senile. Maybe he was also watching that store on that day, and even though Satoshi-kun bought the teddy bear, he didn't remember. Oishi put on a wry smile. It looked like he'd already tried to question that old man.
とにかくあれを買ったのはサトシ君なんです。サトシ君はぬいぐるみの金額ギリギリしかお金がなかったはずだから、ぬいぐるみ代を支払ってさらに逃亡資金を用意できたなんて思えません。めちゃめちゃもいいとこです。
いいですよ。じゃあサトシ君がぬいぐるみを買ったことでもいいです。じゃあそのぬいぐるみを持ってどうして帰らなかったんですか？
That's... At that point, I felt as though my heart had turned to ice. Satoshi-kun had been working hard to buy that teddy bear, even though he was under extreme mental and physical stress. After all that, he finally managed to buy it. It's unthinkable that somebody else just showed up and bought the same teddy bear. The teddy bear was gone because Satoshi-kun bought it. Nobody else. But if so, Satoshi-kun should have given it to Satoko. But, though he bought a present for her, he didn't come home. He didn't come home? That wasn't possible. He would have gone straight home with that teddy bear. He wouldn't think of running away after buying the teddy bear. Even though Satoshi-kun wanted to run away from the police, he'd never leave without giving Satoko her present. Anyway, it must have been Satoshi-kun who bought that teddy bear. I can say that with 100% certainty. The question was, why didn't he bring it home? That teddy bear was huge. It wouldn't fit into the basket of a bicycle. He might have brought some straps to tie it to his bike. He wouldn't have thought of running away on a wobbly bicycle like that. He necessarily had to go home after buying the teddy bear from the store after withdrawing the money. Nothing could have happened when he was going between the ATM and the toy store. It was impossible. Nobody else could possibly have bought that teddy bear. Never. That teddy bear had been sitting in the showcase up until that day. Everybody could see it when they passed by, but nobody wanted it. It's impossible that it could have been somebody else. There should be no question that he went to the toy store after he withdrew the money. What about the route between the toy store and his home? There shouldn't be any question there either. He shouldn't have been able to do anything with that huge toy. He shouldn't even have thought of making a stop on the way. So he must have headed home, right after he bought the teddy bear. But nobody saw him after that. It was simple then. Satoshi-kun went missing on his way home from the toy store. He went missing? What did that mean? I was sure he killed his aunt. He's not that shrewd. Maybe he couldn't bear the pressure from the police? Was he resigned to the idea that the police were going to arrest him soon, regardless of my help? Did he decide to run away? Did he think that he should disappear until things cooled down rather than get arrested? That was definitely, absolutely impossible. It was impossible that he came to that conclusion on his way home from the toy store. Even if he did, he would have waited until he gave Satoko her birthday present. Satoshi-kun loved Satoko. He shouldn't have spoiled her like that, but anyway, he always tried to be a good brother to her, so he never disappeared before going home. Yeah, at least by choice. I felt as though the ice was cutting through my heart, expanding the frost. If Satoshi-kun didn't disappear by his own will, the answer was simple. Satoshi-kun disappeared by somebody else's will.
サトシ君が消された。
Yeah, I mean, the possibility of it being the Sonozakis has now come to her mind.
バカバカしいです。やっぱり退屈な話ですよ、おじさま。
I thought I could shake off the frost in my heart if I laughed loudly enough. I kept laughing until it happened. I kept laughing and laughing. All the cops in the room stared at me. They thought I'd gone crazy. I didn't care what they thought. I kept laughing until it turned into a cough. I finished laughing and took a sip of lukewarm coffee. I felt as though the frost in my heart had spread all throughout my guts. I was chilled to the bone. I was freezing. My fingers shook as I held the coffee cup.
シオンさん、ちょっと口を挟まずに聞いててほしいんです。これから私がちょいと想像した話を申し上げます。
Let's hear what Alishi's got.
全部でっち上げです。だからきっとシオンさんはあまりのいい加減な内容に吹き出しちゃいそうになるかもしれません。それでも最後まで黙って聞いていてほしいんです。約束してもらえます？
いや、約束なんて何でもするから。早く言いなさいよ。
I was feeling far too cold. My teeth were chattering. I felt as though my brain had frozen as well. I lost my ability to think. I couldn't do anything by myself. I could only do as Oishi told me. What he was going to tell me might be the worst possible theory, but I had to listen to it.
死んだおばがサトシ君とサトコさんをいじめていたことはよーく聞いています。中でもサトコさんを執拗にいじめていたこともね。その中でサトシ君が妹をかばうためにおばに殺意を募らせていったとしても、私は人として自然な流れだと思います。
Though as an officer of the law, he can't exactly condone that. I had to deny that Satoshi-kun murdered her, but what Oishi was saying was true. I couldn't deny his hypothesis right away. I just kept silent.
ここからは空想ですよ。絶対に怒らないでください。口を挟むのもなし。いいですね。
わかってるから早く続けなさいよ。
Is this going to be like a game changer? I feel like it's got to be.
北条聡はおば殺しを計画し実行した。ねえ、もちろん証拠なんてありませんよ。全部私の妄想です。
This music, dude, I love the answer arc music. I feel like it fits so much better, which makes a lot of sense because it was literally made for the game, but it really helps set the vibe.
分かってるって。あんたの妄想なのは百も承知。だから早く続けて。
ここで話は変わります。シオンさん、あなたはサトシ君との交際を禁じられたんですよね。もう忘れろ。二度と関わるなと念をされたんですよね。それは実は不仲な両家の関係を意味嫌ったからでなく、殺人犯と園崎家の令嬢が恋仲であることに問題があったんじゃないかと思ったんです。
I mean, this can make sense, I'll be honest. That is actually possible. After all, when I was pretending to be Mion, I already had a connection with Satoshi-kun, before anyone knew it was Shion who was spending time around him. I could have been accused when I was helping out the Hinamizawa fighters if the relationship between the Hojos and the Sonozakis was the problem. It wouldn't be difficult for the Sonozaki family to know that Satoshi-kun murdered his aunt, if it happened in Hinamizawa. Maybe one of them even saw the murder. The Sonozaki family didn't like that I was in love with a murderer. They decided to step in. Well, I don't think it's the fact that it's a murderer, it's the fact that it's a known murderer, right? That makes more sense to me.
あと、あなた、諦めが悪いことでも知られてるんじゃないですか。つまり、園崎本家にサトシ君との縁を切れと脅されて、爪を剥がされても、サトシ君との縁を切りかねていましたよね。
No. I couldn't deny that. I lost most of my means to access Hinamizawa, so my ties to Satoshi-kun were essentially cut, true. But I still knew Satoshi-kun's phone number, and I expected him to rejoin the Hinamizawa fighters eventually. You know, if he didn't go missing.
園崎本家はサトシ君とあなたの縁はちょっと脅しただけじゃ絶対に切れないと分かっていたと思います。あなたをいくら脅してもどうにもならない。じゃあもう一人の方をどうにかするしかないですよね。
どうにかって何？
Look, they got a body pit. That's all I'm saying.
どうにかって何よ？何？
If threatening me was useless, then they'd do something about Satoshi-kun. What would they have done? If they pulled something, then wouldn't that interrupt his path from the toy store to home? Toy store to home. Toy store to X to home. What's X? What is X? X marks the spot where his path was interrupted. But what interrupted it? Why couldn't Satoshi-kun make it home from the toy store if something interrupted him? Why? What's X? X. I ran out of air, became dizzy, and then collapsed. The floor felt cold. I felt no pain. I'd fallen to the floor like a plastic doll. Oishi and some others rushed over to me and helped me up.
落ち着いてシオンさん。サトシ君が殺されたとはまだ限りません。
Dude, I really hope that he wasn't. I mean, like... Look, I don't know. Maybe he was, right? And there's nothing that can be done about that, of course. Well, I guess technically there is, like, whatever. I believe it's a time loop story, so technically, even if he's dead, he could make it out alive. But like, I wouldn't be shocked if the loop stops in 1983, you know. In which case, if he's dead in 1982, ooh, brother's cooked. But I don't know, unless Rika intervenes somehow. But that doesn't really make sense to me. You're not certain he was killed? What the fuck are you talking about? Don't you know about that torture room where they forced me to rip off my fingernails? Don't you know that they say there are prison cells in a well for disposing of corpses in the back? If the Sonozaki family wants to eliminate somebody, they definitely kill them in that torture room and dump the body down there. You're not certain. Are you dumb? Is your brain made of tofu? If I were in the hag's position, I'd kill him for sure. I wouldn't let him get away. If I would kill him, then the hag would definitely kill him.
シオンさん、落ち着いて。これはまだ未確認情報ですが、名古屋駅で家出人風の若者を見たという情報が入っています。東京行きの新幹線に乗ったそうです。服装の特徴などが一致しませんでしたが、警察の追跡等を意識して衣替えをしている可能性もあります。服装が違うからサトシ君でないとは言い切れませんよ。
That's what we gotta hope.
生きてるの？
I don't think Shion believes it though.
サトシ君。
Like, I don't think she will in the long run,
生
at
きて
least.
る？
ここからもまた私の想像になりますがね、あなたの双子のお姉さんのミヨンさん、次期当主ということで園崎お涼の身近にいますよね。園崎お涼はおそらく最初はサトシ君をこっそり殺してしまおうと提案したと思います。それをあなたのお姉さんが止めたんじゃないかと思うんです。
Mion? That was possible. She could have tried to calm things down out of pity for me. That idiot was always so indecisive. She should have been clear on if she wanted to save him or not, but she probably seemed vague about that. She must have persuaded the hag to reduce the punishment to banishment instead of death, just to avoid feeling guilty.
おそらく園崎本家はサトシ君と接触したでしょう。今回の事件はかばいきれない。だから自分の身は自分で守るためにどこかへ姿を隠せと忠告したはずです。
That would be a good way. That would be fortunate, but...
いや、強要したと言った方が似合うでしょうね。
サトシ君は絶対拒否すると思います。だってあのサトシ君が妹を一人残してひなみ沢を離れられるわけがない。
私もそう思います。確かサトシ君は園崎美音さんの紹介でバイトをしてましたよね。
Yeah.
だからサトシ君に逃走資金になるまとまったお金があることを知っていたと思います。
でもサトシ君はそのお金をぬいぐるみを買う以外には絶対に使わないはずです。
でしょうね。サトシ君は貯金を下ろしたら迷うことなくおもちゃ屋に向かうでしょう。でもサトシ君がおもちゃ屋にたどり着くと、もうぬいぐるみが売れてしまっていてなくなっていたら。
That would have been a very desolate situation. Been working hard. While his aunt abused him, he worked at many different jobs. The money was worth all that pain. He went to the toy store with that money in order to buy his beloved sister a present. That was the only purpose for that money. He must have looked for that teddy bear as he'd always done, but it was gone. He wouldn't have gone into a panic right away, because he was always so optimistic. He might have thought the store was wrapping the gift for him, because he told them he'd pick it up that day. He must have gone into the store joyously. I couldn't guess exactly what happened next. My heart would tear up if I tried to imagine it anyway. Dude, that is actually kind of hard to think about. All he endured just to get that teddy bear and it's not there. Why didn't they have it? Even though he had it reserved. Did that old man understand the situation, or was he just zoning out? Sonozaki's probably bought it. It's a Sonozaki... It's a Sonozaki run toy store. Maybe it would have been the same even if it wasn't that old man who was at the store at the time. If a bunch of fierce-looking subordinates from the Sonozaki family went in and showed them the money, nobody could have rejected it. Satoshi-kun must have sunk into silence. No matter how hard he complained, the teddy bear was gone. He probably never even considered that his dream might be taken away. He must have been wobbling his way home in sorrow, leaning on the telephone poles every now and then. It was the day he wanted Satoko to be happy the most. He couldn't get the present she wanted the most. Probably didn't think of getting another gift, because it was unimaginable that he couldn't get that teddy bear. He might have imagined how Satoko would react when she found out he had no present for her. He must have looked unbelievably sad and empty. The money he'd been saving meant nothing anymore. Satoshi-kun never cried, even at his toughest moments. Did he even know how to cry? It was always Satoko who was crying, so Satoshi-kun never learned how to cry, and he grew up that way. Did you know? People shed sadness from their hearts with tears. Satoshi-kun wasn't even allowed to do that. Even though his heart was filled with sorrow, he couldn't let it out.
妹を一人残してひなみ沢を離れられないと言いましたね。でももしも園崎本家が残った聡子さんの面倒は見るって言ってあったとしたらどう思います？
After Satoshi-kun found out the teddy bear was gone, all he had left were some crumbled bills. The family told him it was just a matter of time before the police got to him. They told him to run away. They said they'd take care of Satoko. Satoshi-kun didn't feel like seeing his sister. He wandered and found himself at Okunomiya Station. He must have been apologizing to Satoko so many times in his mind. He swore to come back someday. He headed to Nagoya and then to Tokyo. But that meant he's alive. He's alive. I should be able to see him again someday. He must be coming back, so I'll definitely see him again.
そうしてずっと遠方に隠れ家か 受け入れ先を用意してくれたんじゃないかと思います。
It's definitely something I could see them doing. I don't know, this feels almost too optimistic for me to believe.
サトシ君はそこを目指したのでしょう。
じゃあ無事なんだ。
I'm having a hard time believing it that didn't have to do with the curse, if that makes sense. Like, I don't know, he seemed pretty clearly, like, cursed, right? Like, whatever curse, Hinamizawa syndrome, Hinamizawa craziness, you get the idea, right? And, I don't know, it always seems to eventually, like, claim the life of whoever is affected by it, so I'm having a hard time believing he lived. I don't know. I would love to believe it. I mean, it would throw a lot of my theories into disarray. I mean, it could just mean he actually wasn't affected by it. Then you gotta wonder why this was the 1 year that no one was affected by it, but whatever. And also there's a lot of reason to believe he was, so I don't know. It would throw a lot of theories into disarray, although already, like, my timelines are off, whatever. But it's just so hard for me to believe this right now.
いつか帰ってくるんですよね。
For Shion's sake, I hope he's fine, and Satoko's sake. Oishi looked up at the ceiling and stretched. He didn't answer me. On June 24th, 1982, Satoshi Hojo went missing. There is a possibility that he ran away, as he was the prime suspect of the murder that happened on the 20th of the same month. Yeah, I mean, timeline's already cooked, right? No matter what, basically. Allegedly, someone resembling him was seen at Nagoya Station embarking on a train heading to Tokyo, but the truth is unknown. No one has seen him since. As a matter of fact, no one even knows if he's still alive. Is this the end of the chapter? I didn't hear a boom. But maybe they don't do that in the answer arcs. No, okay. I was gonna say, like, I could see that being an ending point, but surely not. Let's go ahead and read the tips, and then we will talk about this chapter, which was... Ooh, this is a big one. Let's look at notebook. What happened to pages 35 through 41? So let's see, page 34. The information that Satoshi-kun might have headed to Tokyo hasn't been verified. It started as follows. The young man came to the lost and found window, looking for his wallet. The station employee asked him to write down his name on the form. And the young man started writing Hojo as his name, but he stopped in the middle, crumbled the form, and wrote a totally different name on another form. Another station employee witnessed a similar-looking young man rushing into the train heading to Tokyo. The employee from the Lost and Found, and the employee who was on the platform, talked about the suspicious young man in the locker room. That was all. The wallet of the man named Hojo was never reported as found to the Lost and Found office. Interesting. At first, I thought Oishi's theory that the Sonozaki family banished Satoshi-kun from Hinamizawa and looked after Satoko in return was bogus. But thinking about it now, it doesn't seem too far-fetched. After all, Satoko Hojo started living with Rika Furude after Satoshi-kun's disappearance. Rika Furude isn't just a regular girl. She was the head of the Furude family, one of the 3 families. The head of the Kimiyoshi family is Rika Furude's guardian. The Sonozaki family probably couldn't step in due to having been officially opposed to the Hojo family, but Satoko Hojo is in the custody of the 3 families now. Even though the Hojo family was severely ostracized during the dam conflict, Satoko Hojo was now under protection. It seems as though only Satoko was exempted from blame. Why was she spared, even though Satoshi-kun wasn't? Okay, so these two tips kind of lend credence to the idea that Oishi spouted there right at the end. I mean, this one's kind of implying that this is only 2 eyewitness reports, but one of them claims to have seen them writing the word Hojo, and then they crumbled up the paper, right? And then what was the other thing they said, right? I mean, like, the wallet was reported missing. Was looking for his wallet. And the wallet was never reported as found. And then Shion points out that while she initially thought the Sonozaki protection theory was bogus, you gotta keep in mind, I mean, Satoko did basically get adopted by the three families, right? The Kimiyoshi and the Furudes. Well, the Furude, right? It's not plural anymore, but, you know, not the point. So I don't know. I guess it makes sense. It's, God, I don't know. Maybe. Thing is, my theories are already, like, in disarray, regarding the curse, so maybe I need to wonder if, I don't know, what if he got cured or something, right? It sounded like he was going to Irie a lot to help with his stress, right? I wonder if somehow Irie was curing him, right? Like, maybe that's why, like, he started hearing things. So, like, maybe the killing wasn't even related to that. I don't know. Because I don't think any of the timelines really line up all that well. Right, like, I don't know, it doesn't... With my old theories, with, like, it being 6 days, right, like, but kind of 3 and 3 of 3 with symptoms, 3 without, that just doesn't line up here. It was 4 days after the murder he went missing, so unless he killed without even, like, I don't know, does it line up? Maybe it lines up a little better than I thought, but still not quite, even if you assume the night of the murder is the night he kind of started experiencing symptoms again, because he already experienced them before, right? Even if you assume that, it was 4 days, so I don't know. Maybe he was legit cured, right? I don't know. I'm not sure where I'm at with Satoshi. I'm gonna give that a little bit to kind of stew on, but let's, I guess, kind of talk about the chapter itself. So, I mean, this was just actually a huge chapter. I mean, you got two massive events in Shion getting punished, right? Which, and this is something I was thinking about in the moment, could easily explain any motive if we think it was chapter 2, right? The chapter 2 was Shion, right? Which I do, to be clear, right? I do think that, right? The motivations make a lot more sense to me. First of all, yeah, she holds a grudge against Oryu, right? Probably holds a grudge against Mion, right? You know, definitely holds some kind of grudge against Satoko, maybe against Rika, maybe against Kimiyoshi as well, just because of his role as the mayor, maybe, like, I don't know. Like, none of those feel that weird as, like, targets for her to try to kill, you know? But more notably is the fact that if she got caught in Hinamizawa doing something that was explicitly forbidden by the three families, you know what might happen? They might decide to punish her, right? Maybe she didn't want to go through that again. Maybe she was like, you know what, Mion? No, I'm not going to do this, and just snapped, right? Like, maybe they had a fight, right, over this. And maybe that's what really kicked things off. I'm like, that kind of makes sense to me, honestly. That this could easily be a motivation, like a part of the motivation, other than just raw fear, for what started off the killings in chapter 2, you know? Which I think is interesting to think about, right? And obviously you got Satoshi's disappearance, and there's a little more evidence now that maybe he really did just disappear, right? Maybe he's in Tokyo, right? Like, actually, you know? It's, like, not completely impossible, you know? These tips kind of, like I said, lend credence to that theory. Oishi's idea that maybe Mion, despite everything, managed to get Oryu to reconsider killing him and instead to, like, just basically make him leave under the promise that Satoko would be protected, right? And I'm like, I mean, I could see it. I could see it. It still feels a little optimistic to me, but, like, I don't know. It's not completely impossible. The theory makes enough sense that I'm not willing to discard it. I feel like right now it's one of those things where I definitely want to see more of how this chapter plays out, and then I'll maybe decide if I think it makes the most sense. It could definitely be truth, but again, this is one of those things. It was just Oishi's theory, right? He has a little bit of proof, but nothing like, or a little bit of evidence, but nothing like super duper solid, right? Mainly just conjecture, and I mean, a lot of characters have conjecture, if like explaining things, right? That doesn't mean they're right. So I don't know. It's also worth thinking about whether, like, Oishi very clearly still has sources in the Sonozaki family, which is interesting. You almost kind of wonder, is the source someone we know, or is it just someone undisclosed? Right. And does he explicitly have ties with the Sonozakis is something I'm still wondering. Honestly, ever since the, like, Chapter 4, when he somehow escaped that brush with the Sonozakis, I'm just still wondering if, like, he's, like, a little more connected with the Sonozakis than he would obviously lead us on to believe, and his source isn't necessarily, like, a third party, it's him, like, he knows this stuff. Right, the thing is, I guess he couldn't have really been in the room, for the torture, or else that's probably something that would have been noticed, right? But, like, I don't know, it could explain why he seems to always escape these brushes with death. You know? If he's genuinely connected with them, especially, like, I always think back to Chapter 4, I'm like, how did he not die there? Like, I mean, he was in a one-on-one fight with that guy, right? Like, with a Sonozaki, right? Who knocked him down and was, like, choking him out, and he gets up, like, 20 seconds later, right? You gotta wonder, like, did he strike a deal? Like, was he already had a deal with them? He was like, whoa, 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 I'm Oishi, you better relax. Like, I don't know. I just think, like, just them kind of bringing up his potential Sonozaki connections again really had me thinking more on that. Because I didn't think about that as much as I wanted to before making the theory video, because I really didn't know what to say beyond what I just said, basically. But it's something that I really want to keep an eye on. I wouldn't be shocked if he has connections. In a bad way. Alright. But I think that's enough about this chapter itself, and so I think we might as well just go ahead and run the next one. I don't know what else is going to be in this chapter. Oh, wait, no. Obviously, are we going to get, like, a jump cut? Because it mentioned that Keiichi would be here. Actually, I knew the chapter wasn't ending, because it mentioned specifically that Keiichi would be in it.
今、なんて？
信頼できる筋の噂ですが、サトシ君の叔母殺しの犯人が見つかったらしいです。
Yeah. Actually, if Shion had nothing to do with this... Actually, I didn't even think about this. This might make it even more obvious that it actually was the Sonozakis that hit him. You know? It had been a few weeks since the murder. Satoshi-kun still hadn't been found. I had no new information on his whereabouts. Kasai's report came, as a result, completely out of the blue.
それって、警察が逮捕したって意味？
聞いた話では、逮捕というより、別件で取り調べを受けていた男が、余罪として自供したんだとか。
That sounded strange. If it was Satoshi-kun they arrested, he wouldn't have worded it that way. It sounded as though Satoshi-kun wasn't the culprit.
葛西、結局、犯人って誰だったの？
So it wasn't Satoshi-kun. I swallowed those final words. I was convinced that it was Satoshi-kun. The police and Oishi must have thought the same way. The reason Oishi approached me is because he was convinced that Satoshi-kun did it.
ご安心を。サトシ君ではないようですよ。連続開始事件を模倣した異常者の犯行というような話みたいです。
はい？異常者？何それ？
Kasai shrugged.
さあ、私もそれ以上は。何しろ今回の事件は秘匿捜査指定というものがかかっているんだそうです。なので、ほとんど情報が出回らないんです。
秘匿捜査？何それ？
連続開始事件による村への風評被害対策ということらしいです。
Yeah, I mean, this all screams Sonozaki foul play.
誘拐事件なんかでも犯人との交渉が行われている間は新聞に載らなかったりするでしょ。ああいう類のものらしいです。
Come to think of it, I hadn't seen anything about the aunt's murder on TV or in the newspaper.
何しろ4年連続で綿流しの日に事件が起こっているわけですからね。 お社様のたたりだと騒いで面白がる輩も多いそうですし、そうそう、何でもそのおば殺しの異常者ですが、連続開始事件を模倣したくて行ったと自供したんだとか。
Kasai didn't know anything else, so instead of probing him further, I reviewed the information myself. I was really shocked to learn all this. I was convinced that Satoshi-kun killed her. I thought that was the reason he had to disappear. But it was actually some lunatic who killed her, and he had no relation to the aunt whatsoever. So, Satoshi-kun had nothing to do with the murder? No, I do not believe it. If so, why did he disappear? I couldn't accept that this lunatic had killed the aunt. And what's really strange is the phrase Kasai used 4 years in a row now. After all, I'd been thinking that this murder happened because Satoshi-kun had been in a dire situation, and had nothing to do with the series of mysterious deaths. I felt as though Satoshi-kun's case had become somebody else's. The series of mysterious deaths in Hinamizawa is also known as the Curse of Oyashiro-sama. I guess now that you put it like that, you gotta wonder, is that true of all of them? Right? Like, which is like it's kind of obvious, but like, I don't know, is it as simple as like Rika's dad was murdered by Rika's it was dad and mom, right? I'm pretty sure it was her parents that died. It might have, for some reason there's a part of me that went like they were old. It might have been grandparents, but I think it was her parents. Almost positive it was, right? Like, was the dad just murdered by the mom and then the mom vanished, right? And it was covered up just like this, right? And same true of last year. Although, didn't Satoko witness that? Like, her mom and dad, like, dying? So it wouldn't really make sense. Unless unless it was something crazy, like the mom, like, knew she was suiciding, like, by stepping on that, like, ledge, you know? I don't know. Well, you gotta wonder. Just, I mean, just pointing out that, like, this one is so different, but, like, you gotta wonder, is it different? Or was it just more sloppy? The series of mysterious deaths in Hinamizawa is also known as the Curse of Oyashiro-sama. Satoshi-kun's case had become one of those mysterious deaths. In other words, Satoshi-kun's case has become a part of Oyashiro-sama's curse. I didn't like the way that sounded, because it was as though the curse had swallowed Satoshi-kun. Back to the police office.
残念ながら、例の東京行きの新幹線に乗ったらしいという情報も確認が取れないままです。正直なところ、県の中にいるのか外にいるのか、それすらも分かっちゃいません。
Oishi broke the seal on a new can of instant coffee.
あれだけ胸を張ってサトシ君が犯人だと息巻いていたから、もう行方をつかんでるとばかり思ってました。
いやいや、情けない限りです。
Oishi chuckled and poured a cup of coffee which looked far too hot.
しかし、耳が早いな。
はい？
秘匿捜査指定だってのに、どこの誰が漏らしてるやら。やれやれ。うちの傍聴も問題があるな。
Oishi smirked. Seemed he knew why I was here today.
まあ、腐っても園崎の端くれですので、多少の噂は耳にできますということで。
I smirked back at him. It's all about bluffing.
まあいいか。腹を割り合った仲ですしね。いいですよ。
Friends is maybe a strong way to put it, but...
まず聞かせてください。真犯人って一体何者です？異常者とか聞きましたけど、それってどういうことですか？
Yeah, I'd love some information on them.
どういうことって言われたってね。そりゃ私だって言いたいですよ。私はサトシ君が犯人の一点読みでしたからね。とんだ万馬券が飛び出したもんです。
Oishi threw himself on the sofa and crossed his hands behind his head. He looked up at the ceiling and smiled wryly.
先日ですね、県警の方から急に連絡が来たんですよ。すでに逮捕して取り調べをしている男が主婦殺しを自供したって。
それは何者？
薬に手を出したとんでもない野郎でしてね。出所しては捕まるの繰り返しだそうです。
How long has he been in?
ひなみ沢村連続開始事件が面白そうだったんで、4年目のたたりは自分が下してみたくなった。
間違いなくそいつが犯人？
私が直接話を聞いたわけじゃないんですがね、先方が取った供述調書にはいわゆる犯人しか知り得ない情報ってやつががっつりと含まれていたんですよ。
I mean, could have easily been fed to them by the Sonozakis, which is something I've kind of suspected for a while.
凶器を王子川のどこかで捨てたって言ってましてね。今はドブさらいの最中ですよ。これで供述通りに凶器が発見されれば完璧でしょうな。
たとえ凶器が見つからなくても、おおむね確定。
確定でしょうな。現場の状況と仏の状況を正確に供述しています。襲った本人にしかわからないような細かいあたりまでね。
納得はいってないみたいですね。
Oishi, still looking up at the ceiling, went quiet.
実はね、とっくに亡くなってるんですよ。うちに連絡があった時にはすでに。
亡くなってる？
給食とかに出てくるでしょ。留置場の食事にもあれが出てくるんですよ。そいつを飲み込んで窒息したんだとか、自殺なのか錯乱なのか、ちょっと区別がつかないですがね。
I imagine somebody swallowing that spoon and gagged.
だから十分に納得するまで調べられたわけじゃありません。私は納得できないんですがね。どうもその愉快犯が主婦殺しの犯人ってことで決着しそうな流れです。
Oishi turned his eyes from the ceiling to me. He looked serious.
これは個人的な意見ですよ。他の誰にも内緒ということで。私はこの大バカたりは何かの間違いだと思ってます。
Yeah, probably.
何かの偶然による壮大な勘違いか、もしくは。
Yeah.
ね
Didn't really say that out loud, though.
全然意味わかんないですよ、大石のおじさま。
私は今でも犯人は北条聡君だと思っています。
きっぱり言い切りますね。
残念ながら現場検証では犯人を特定できるような痕跡は何一つ発見できませんでした。聡君が失踪した後、家宅捜索の許可が下りましてね、家を改めさせてももらいましたが。
それでもサトシ君が犯人だと疑ってる。
Yeah, I mean, it's not hard to see why.
ねえ。
証拠もないのにどうやったらそこまで人を殺人犯呼ばわりできるのやら。大したもんです。長年の勘ってやつですか。
ええ、この道で何十年も飯を食ってきた男の直感です。
Oishi smiled in satisfaction, but I didn't feel relieved.
サトシ君はどこへ？
サトシ君が失踪した理由の一つこそが彼が犯人であるからだと固く信じていたんです。サトシ君が犯人でないならそのあたりがかなり薄れちゃいますからね。
Unless his disappearance had genuinely nothing to do with it, I suppose.
おば殺しの犯人はその愉快犯で、サトシ君の失踪とは無関係。サトシ君失踪は私とサトシ君の仲を裂くために園崎本家がやったもの。おば殺しとは無関係という考え方は？
Was Sachikun a culprit or a victim? The reason for his disappearance had become unclear.
私は旧敵との恋仲程度で人一人を失踪させるなんてリスクを冒すとは思わないんですがね。
Yeah.
実際園崎家の内部としてはどうなんです？シオンさんはそのあたり何かご存知？
No, not really.
知っていたらこんなとこに来ません。
ごもっともごもっとも。
Oishi laughed out loud while scratching his head, and after he stopped laughing, he leaned over.
よーし。協定を結びませんか？紳士協定。
Interesting.
協定？何のです？
サトシ君失踪事件捜査情報共有協定。裏の界隈でサトシ君の失踪に関する情報を得られたら私にも教えてください。もちろん私もサトシ君についての情報が入ったらあなたに提供します。いかがです？
なんだか一方的な虫のいい話に思えますけど。
Oishi chuckled.
シオンさん、このまま行くと主婦殺しの犯人はすでに死んでるその大バカタレってことで確定すると思います。
Correct.
そうなるとサトシ君の扱いは単なる家出人になります。
Yep.
つまり積極的な捜査は打ち切られるということです。ですが私だけは続けます。私だけはサトシ君の行方を引き続き探します。シオンさんも私もサトシ君の行方を探しているという点では一致してると思うんですがね。
Yeah, most likely.
目的が全然違いますがね。
Very true.
私は単に無事を確認したいだけですが、大石のおじさまにとっては逮捕が目的でしょうから。
主婦殺しが決着すればサトシ君は無実ってことになりますよ。真実はどうかは別にしてもね。
怪しいもんです。
Oishi chuckled again, but his smile didn't reach his eyes.
まあ今後も仲良くやりましょう。敵の敵は味方とも言いますしね。
別に私、園崎本家と敵対しているわけじゃありませんよ。
Really?
なあ、本当に？ならそりゃ失礼。
This is the way of Kurado Oishi, huh? As Sis and Kasai said, I wouldn't want him as my enemy or my ally, because both would be too risky. I probably shouldn't let my guard down in front of this big fat weasel. I sipped on the coffee to fill up the silence, though I wasn't thirsty. Outside the window, I could see normal life taking its course, but Satoshi-kun wasn't there. He should have been there, but he wasn't. I was scared that I might grow used to his absence someday. Where was he?
サトシ君はどうしてるんだろう。
For your sake, I hope he's not a pile of bones in the well.
無事だといいんですがね。
I feel like that would have been mentioned by Oishi, though, to be honest.
生きてる可能性は薄いとか思っているくせに、気休め言わないでほしいです。
サトシ君の失踪、ひなみ沢じゃ何て言われてるか知ってます？
An Onikakushi.
え？
鬼隠しにあったなんて言われてるんだとか。
To be demoned away means the same thing as being spirited away. It's part of the local dialect.
鬼が淵沼の底の鬼の国にさらわれたって？バカバカしい。
とにもかくにも連続開始事件もこれで4年目です。気の早い話ですがね、来年もまた起こるんじゃないかなんてもうささやかれてるんだとか。
Well, we know how that plays out.
おば殺しがお社様のたたりのせいだって言うんですか？
That's what the villagers believe.
全体的に見てみれば仏も北条家の一人、ダム戦争の戦犯と縁がないわけじゃないですからね。しかもまたしても綿流しの日にとなれば面白がる連中が現れるのも無理もないことです。
バカバカしい。何がお社様のたたりだ。
Deep down, she believes it, though. Though I said that, I couldn't quite wipe away the fear from my mind. Why did Satoshi-kun disappear? Was it the Sonozaki family? Did he run away from the police? Did he really kill his aunt in the first place? Why did he even disappear? This music is banger. I love the kind of... Dude, I really like this music. God, I know I keep repeating that, but this music adds so much to the vibe that the old music, it was good, but it didn't quite hit the vibe like this does, for me, at least. Maybe others disagree, but I love the new music. Why did he disappear? He's on his own. Oyashiro-sama's curse has nothing to do with it. But, that's strange. Satoshi-kun and Oyashiro-sama's curse. Somebody once mentioned those two together before. Are you going to tell him that? When did I hear that? Ah, that's right. That rainy day. It was Rena Ryugu who told me that, when we were taking shelter in that shack. I remembered the creepy story that she told me at the time.
サトシ君は心のどこかで
ひなみ沢を捨ててどこかへ逃げ出したいと思ってるから。
That's what Rena Ryugu said. Ren had definitely pointed out that Satoshi-kun wanted to leave Hinamizawa at that time. She also said,
サトシ君が体験していることはすべてお社様のたたりの前触れなの。
Oh man, she said that. For sure. She had definitely mentioned Oyashiro-sama's curse. Is Shion gonna believe it more because of this? I mean, kind of valid. The series of mysterious deaths has struck 4 times. Was Satoshi-kun being controlled by the curse? Is that why he killed his aunt and was demoned away? No way. That can't be true. Satoshi-kun's smile faded away in my mind. Satoshi-kun disappeared. Not only that, the reason for his disappearance also disappeared. It must have been done by human beings. I can't accept that he was demoned away. Notebook page 43. Yeah, I mean... It is, like, when you look at it, that's so suspicious that his reason for disappearing also disappeared. Right? It's so hard to just accept that as the work of not as the work of humans, for me at least. I don't know. Like, it's not impossible. But it just seems, like, it seems likely that it was humans that, like, covered this up, at least. Whether that's what caused him to murder in the first place, like, was it just him, or was it something about the curse itself? I don't know. Right? Maybe that's also what caused his disappearance. I don't know. Satoshi's case is hard, honestly. I'm gonna have to spend more time thinking about it. I'm not, like, super likely to come up with an episode, or answer mid-episode. I moved from one chair to another because the air conditioning was too cold. I moved with my notebook, my pen case with a bunch of keychains, and my cup of milk tea. I did it all in one go. I sat down in a new chair, then opened my notebook again. I scribbled my thoughts and sank into silence. The series of mysterious deaths, dubbed the Curse of Oyashiro-sama. I've been viewing each incident as a separate case, even though it was followed by another one. I've never looked at all the cases as part of one big scheme. After I wrote down all the incidents on paper, it became clear to me that all of them served the same agenda. I wrote down the victims. The first year, the construction site manager. The second year, Satoshi-kun's parents. The third year, the priest. The fourth year, Satoshi-kun's aunt. For the fourth year, one could consider Satoshi-kun himself to be the victim, rather than his aunt. If I consider that each case arose from the grudge over the dam conflict, it's quite simple. In the first year, the construction manager was killed because he was a symbol of the dam construction itself. Of course, the real enemy was the Ministry of Construction, but it wasn't as clear a target. That manager, on the other hand, had been aggressively shouting back at the villagers, so he was a more appropriate enemy to attack. If Oyashiro-sama had really cursed someone, it would have been the officials from the Ministry. It's apparent that the target was selected based on the villagers' preference. Yes, that makes a lot of sense to me, personally. The second year, the accidental death of Satoshi-kun's parents. It said that they fell from a cliff in some park, but it's doubtful that it was really an accident. His parents were labeled as traitors to the village because they sided with the dam construction, even though they were also from Hinamizawa. The Hojo family was ostracized during the dam conflict in order to prevent further pro-dam activists from rising up. That means that the Hojos were necessary during the conflict to play the role of the traitor. So when the conflict was over, they no longer served any purpose. Yeah, I guess in a way that makes sense. Like, just to have, like, if you're the Sonozakis, for example, maybe it wasn't them, but if you're the Sonozakis, it doesn't make sense to kill them when you can use them as a scapegoat and unify the village against that force, right? But afterwards, they don't serve any purpose. The construction site manager was a symbol of the external enemy. The Hojos were a symbol of the internal enemy. Those people fell victim to the curse, and it seemed that the grudge over the dam conflict had ended. Yet those incidents were followed by another one. The third year, the leader of one of the 3 families, the priest Furude, suddenly died of an illness with an unknown cause. His wife drowned herself on the same night. She seemed to have left a note that said she was sacrificing herself to pacify Oyashiro-sama's anger. Whether it was a fatal disease or suicide, their deaths looked suspicious. Mion admitted that the Sonozaki family didn't like the priest's attitude. They didn't like how the priest had been generous towards the pro-dam activists. The priest wasn't quite a traitor, but he was certainly uncooperative. Looking at these incidents, I realized that the curse was performed based on the degree of hostility: enemy, traitor, and dissident. This meant that the curse was actually payment. It was a punishment for the criminals of war. In the 4th year. I didn't understand this case at first, to be honest. At first, I believed that this case was separate from the other ones, even though it occurred on the same day. I never thought that there would be any relation to the other 3. But when I wrote it down and looked at it objectively, the victim is a relative of a traitor. After enemy, traitor, and dissident, relative of a traitor doesn't sound too odd. It comes naturally as a 4th target. On the day the villagers worship Oyashiro-sama, their guardian deity, the criminals of the dam conflict have been punished by the curse. Just like how I was forced to pay at the Sonozaki house, the criminals were made to pay as well. After writing these things out, I started thinking that the 4th incident might be in line with the series of mysterious deaths after all. Whether it was Satoshi-kun or the dopehead, it seemed that they were forced to play the role of a murderer as a part of a bigger scenario, and I guess if you think about it, if we assume the victim, like in the next case, is just Tomitake, not Takano, it's just outsider, which is a step down from relative of a traitor. So if we're going by that logic of it's like descending order of like being against the village, then it kind of makes sense. Like, I do agree that there is obviously a connection there, and I feel like that's been apparent since literally chapter 1, but it seemed that they were forced to play the role of a murderer as part of a bigger scenario, and that is one thing I've been kind of considering, and I kind of mentioned this, is I'm like, look, I maybe didn't talk as much as I should have in the theory video about this, but my idea is kind of that somebody is influencing the murderers, right? Like, through the curse, or the Hinamizawa syndrome, or whatever. Right? Very possibly. Like, that makes sense to me for the most part. And I wouldn't be shocked if this person is choosing whoever, like, is affected by it based on who they want to target. But at the same time, does that make sense? I don't know, because if that was the case, you'd think it would always be the same person, but it's not. I don't know, I just said all that about how it would make a lot of sense to me that it was like this kind of idea that Shion has, that it's like descending order, they're forced to play the role of a murderer as part of a bigger scenario. Possibly they think it's their will, but it really wasn't. And it's all part of this bigger scheme, and that still makes the most sense to me, but like, I don't know. Let's just keep moving. Even if Satoshi-kun was the real culprit, even if he killed his aunt because of an ordinary grudge, the murder seems synchronized with the grand scheme of the series of mysterious deaths in Hinamizawa, which is a payment plan for the war criminals. That murder was the result of his pain. But what if somebody planned that as part of a scenario? For instance, somebody might have suggested to him to kill his aunt on that day, that night, at that place. I had no doubts that Satoshi-kun decided to kill her in order to protect Satoko. But did he really reach that conclusion on his own? See, and that's kind of what I was just saying, actually. I really agree with this, right? And when I think, like, specifically when I think, like, for example, Chapter 3 Keiichi, right? I think, did he really reach that conclusion to kill Teppei on his own, right? I would need to go back and see the talk with Takano, but it felt like it kind of was leading him in that direction, right? Like, I don't know. That's just an example, and it could be the same with, again, this is why I'm saying Takano always appearing and kind of giving that talk about Watsunagashi before these people go crazy. Like, it makes sense to me, right? Like, as, like, why she could be, like, the one who's manipulating people, right? In Chapter 2, she talks to Shion before, before all the murders, and what if she made Shion, like, think, like, well, like, and specifically after, like, she had some kind of conflict with her sister. She was like, well, if I kill, right, then, you know, I can, like, I don't know how to think about it, like, how to word this, right? Maybe that's what made her, like, kind of snap, but, like, the idea was in her head already, right? Like she's saying. This is fascinating stuff. Let's keep going. Satoshi-kun was optimistic and somewhat detached, as far as I know. Would he really have considered murdering his aunt, even if it was to protect his sister? Couldn't it be possible for somebody to have chosen the aunt as the 4th year's murder beforehand? And they used Satoshi-kun, and Satoshi-kun was eliminated because of his connections with them? Looking at it that way, the murder of the first year resembles this case. The main culprit behind that case hasn't been found yet, dead or alive. The other culprits testify that their fight had turned into a slaughter. But wouldn't it be possible that the main culprit had manipulated the situation? What if he had been told to kill someone on that day, at that time, and in that place? I'm certain the first murder resembles Satoshi-kun's case very much. So, did that mean Satoshi-kun was being controlled by somebody else? Oishi had presented me with a hypothesis that the Sonozaki family made Satoshi-kun disappear in order to end my relationship with the murderer. But when I read the notes I wrote down, his disappearance didn't seem too spontaneous. It seemed like part of a bigger plan. Since I'd unexpectedly gotten involved in that plan, I had to be separated from him, and Satoshi-kun was demoned away as planned. At first, I also believed that the Sonozaki family made him disappear because they didn't like that I was in love with a member of a family of traitors. But something didn't add up. Something felt strange. I wasn't the reason for his disappearance after all. Even if I never met him in the first place, Satoshi-kun was supposed to kill his aunt in June 1982 and then disappear. At one point, I'd been thinking of taking revenge on the hag. I believed that she separated us. But what if my relationship with Satoshi-kun had nothing to do with his disappearance? What would that mean? Who made Satoshi-kun disappear? I needed to understand the series of mysterious deaths in order to solve this mystery. What did all these deaths mean? Who was behind them, and what purpose did they serve? I wanted to know the purpose, the motive, and who was responsible. Who took Satoshi-kun? I wanted to know if he was still alive. The series of mysterious deaths in Hinamizawa is also called a Yashiro-sama's curse. What is that curse? Specifically, what kind of god is Oyashiro-sama? What blessings does he bring, and what punishments does he dole out? I wrote down my thoughts in the notebook. What's Oyashiro-sama? What is he? I scribbled these things down. I was so absorbed by it that I didn't realize somebody had been standing behind me, watching me the whole time. I couldn't stop myself from gasping when I realized that.
ごめんなさい。
You're kidding! Are we for real? Are we for real right now? Say it ain't so. Oh, I wonder why she might have an interest in this. Wouldn't that be crazy? Interesting. Very, 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 very interesting that you would show up right now of all times, huh? Just saying.
驚かせちゃったかしら。
The intelligent-looking woman giggled.
いえ、びっくりしただけです。
That is what startled means.
こちらこそ場違いな大声を出してすみませんでした。
She could have apologized a little better too, since she'd been watching me from behind, but she just stared at my face instead.
あなたが園崎シオンさん？
私の名前を知ってて、私が初対面ということは、お姉の知り合いか何かですか？
Interesting. Does this imply a connection with the Sonozakis? Being twins is a pain sometimes. People you've never met before can tell exactly who you are. Well, okay, I guess that's not that weird. That's really not that weird. They're from Hinamizawa, right?
ごめんなさいね。私の知っている園崎さんは図書館なんかに来るような人じゃないから、噂に聞いた双子のシオンさんかなと思って。
That's accurate. You know, I actually don't know if I ever mentioned this once in the theory video, and this is something that I always thought was weird with Takano and Tomitake, is specifically at one point, Tomitake says that she is not from Hinamizawa, and that's always stuck with me as really weird, given that she is literally, like, she works there, presumably lives there. Maybe she doesn't live there, and that makes sense, but it was just always struck me as weird, just something I wanted to say. The woman giggled again.
お察しの通り、私は園崎シオンです。どうもはじめまして。失礼ですがどちら様ですか？
あら、ごめんなさいね。自己紹介がまだだったわね。
She seemed to love her own hair because she kept running her fingers through it boastfully.
高野美代。美代って呼んでくれていいわよ。シオンちゃん。
That's interesting. No one else has been given that privilege that I know, or at least Keiichi never was.
お気遣いありがとうございます。高野さん。
Got him! Her condescending attitude bugged me. I hate meeting people like that. I closed my notebook and got ready to leave the desk.
あら、怒ってる？
ご検察、痛み入ります。私は一人で考え事をするのが好きなんで、よそへ行かせていただきます。失礼します。ごきげんよう。
残念ね。私たち話が合うと思ったのに。
そうですか？私は会うとは思いかねますが。
So hostile.
だってお社様のたたりについて研究する同志に出会えたんですもの。貴重な出会いだと思うんだけど。
She saw my notes. My face reddened.
これは私の、そう、妄想みたいなもの。でたらめです。子供の落書きなんかほっといてください。
お社様のたたりと呼ばれる一連の連続開始事件。
Yes, thank you, Takano. We're aware. You've explained this 4 times now.
いずれの事件も個別に見えながら確実に一つの意思に基づいて行われている。
I do gotta say, if Takano is actually the villain, she's like the most, one of the most overt villains I've ever seen. Like, she straight up is like, yeah, they're connected. Yeah, someone's gonna die. Yeah, be scared. Right? Like, and then like, oops, imagine if it's like, oops, it was me, and I was basically telling you guys about the incidents and, you know, kind of implying that someone needs to die in 3 days. Hey, Keiichi, maybe put in some work real quick.
毎年一人がお社様のたたりにあって死に、一人が生贄に捧げられて失踪する。
That sacrifice part might interest Shion.
は？何を急に言い出すんですか？一人がたたりで死んで、一人が何ですって？
I was taken aback by her weird spiel, but I realized right away that she'd said something extraordinary.
南沢村連続開始事件の犠牲者が常に偶数人数だってことはあなたも気づいてたんじゃない？それともまだそこまでには至ってなかったかしら？
The number of victims is always even. I was confused, but I tried to figure out what that meant. The damn construction site manager died in the first year. There was only 1 victim. In the second year, the victims were the parents of Satoshi-kun, so it was 2 people. In the third year, it was the priest, and if her death was also planned, his wife, 2 again. And in this year, the 4th year, Satoshi-kun's aunt died and Satoshi-kun went missing. If Satoshi-kun's disappearance was planned, the number of the victims was 2. It's true. Except for the first one, the victims always came in an even number. 2. Wait. I just concluded myself that the first case resembled the 4th one. The main culprit was still missing. He might have been demoned away, just like Satoshi-kun.
ね、そうでしょ？
Takano-san sounded like a teacher who had showed me how to solve a difficult math problem. I wasn't quite convinced, but I couldn't deny what she'd said either.
ヒントはこのくらいでいいかしら？二人で存分に語り明かしたかったんだけど、あなたが孤独を好むなら仕方がないしね。
Enough hints. Interesting. No, no, no. No, don't leave. No. Give me more hints.
失礼な口の聞き方をしてすみませんでした、ミオさん。私のことはシオンと呼んでください。
Switched up real quick. She seemed content that I changed my attitude. She kept giggling for a while. She didn't seem that reliable. I didn't want to be acquainted with her for too long. But I don't get to talk to people very much. And what she said interested me.
改めて自己紹介するわね。高野美代よ。美代って呼んでくれると嬉しいわ。
よろしくです、ミオさん。私は園崎シオン。ミオンの双子の妹にあたります。シオンと呼んでください。
I took the hand that Mio-san held out as a sign of reconciliation.
さっきの話を聞かせてください。二人犠牲者が出ると言いましたね。一人がたたりで、もう一人が、生贄とか言いましたか？
ねえ、シオンちゃん。このお話で盛り上がる前に、どうしてこの話に興味があるか聞かせてもらってもいいかしら。
She leaned over and looked into my eyes. It was kind of uncomfortable.
ミオさんこそ、私のことをどこまでご存知です？ご存知なら、おおよその見当はつくんじゃないかと。
さあ。何年か遠くの全寮制の学校にいて、最近沖宮に戻ってきたとしか知らないわよ。
そうですか。じゃあ想像つきますよね。私がいない間に起こった連続開始事件。私はよくわからないので調べてるんです。
Okay, hiding the true motives.
ちょっとした興味本位で。
Just curious.
なるほどね。興味本位で。 ね。
We do a little bit of lying. I got the impression that she knew about what happened to Satoshi-kun and me, because she instantly recognized me as Shion, not Mion. I didn't know why I thought that way, and she shouldn't have access to the sources that, for instance, Oishi does. It was just the look in her eyes that made me think that way.
ミオさんにも聞きます。さっき私のことをお社様のたたりについて調べる同志と言いましたね。なぜたたりなんか研究してるんですか？そして連続開始事件の犠牲者は偶数人であることも言い切りましたね。ひなみ沢連続開始事件は確かに通称でお社様のたたりと呼ばれています。なぜたたりを研究すると連続開始事件にまで踏み込むことになるのですか？
シオンちゃん、質問が一度に多すぎるわね。
Kinda true.
それに何が聞きたいのかややこしくて分かりにくいわ。
Ooh. I couldn't say anything in return. Maybe I'd been too inquisitive.
順に答えるわね。私が研究しているのはたたりじゃなく、もっと広義。鬼ヶ淵村の風俗詩よ。平たく言えば古代ひなみ沢村の知られざる歴史、暗黒史について研究しているの。
鬼ヶ淵村？鬼ヶ淵って鬼の国につながってるっていう村の奥にある底なし沼のことですか？
So she didn't even know it was called that.
あと知られざる歴史、暗黒史って何です？
I kept asking questions. Mio-san, however, looked pleased to hear them.
鬼ヶ淵村というのはひなみ沢村の明治以前の名前よ。暗黒史というのは人食い鬼の歴史は。
Ah, the man-eating demons, huh? That was a fairy tale told in Hinamizawa. A long time ago, demons came out of the swamp, and while the villagers battled with them, they ended up living peacefully together. The villagers transcended and became a sacred people, having demon blood in their veins. That long-forgotten fairy tale came back to my mind vividly.
ひなみ沢に縁のある人なら誰もが知ってる当たり前の昔話よね。
I still wonder how literal that is.
ではその半人半鬼の仙人たちが時に山を降り、
何の話ですか？
村人たちの体に半分流れる鬼の血は、鬼は鬼でも人食い鬼の血だったって話は聞いたことない？
ああ、まあそんな話もありますね。
I dodged the question. Hinamizawa used to be a desolate village, but it grew in prominence after the Second World War and expanded its influence to Okonomiya and other areas. The people who disliked and discriminated against the villagers called us man-eating demons. I remember that. The young villagers don't take it seriously, but the older people can get seriously upset about it. They certainly can't take it as a joke. So the term man-eating demons is forbidden. We normally never use it. Even during my rebellious phase, I never spoke those words. Phase? It ended? Mio-san, however, seemed to have no qualms with saying it out loud.
気に障った？
何がですか？
人食い鬼って単語を意味嫌う村人は多いからね。気に障ったなら謝るけれど。
年寄り連中は気にするらしいですけど、まあ私はそんなには気にしてませんので、それより続けてください。
ありがとう。じゃあ続けるわね。古代の村人たちにはね、人を食らう食人の習慣があったらしいの。そしてその食人の儀式を様式化し、私たちが6月のお祭りだと思っている綿流しだって、本来は犠牲者をさらい食べるために行う食人の宴だった。彼らはね、犠牲者を高速台に縛り付け、お魚をおろす時みたいに腹綿を引きずり出して、それを川に投げ捨てたとされている。ほら、魚の腹綿って綿って言うじゃない？それが語源よ。綿流しの。
綿流し。
そうよ。お布団の綿なんかでごまかすようになったのは、私の研究では明治の頃からじゃないかと思うわね。 まさかこの昭和の時代にそんな恐ろしいことが堂々とできるわけもないのだし。
Yeah, I reckon not. Everything Mio-san was talking about sounded startling. I was just taken aback. I couldn't wholly believe it right away. She sensed that from my expression.
もちろん思いつきなでっち上げなんかでは断じてない。
And I could believe it, honestly.
誰にも見せないって誓うなら、綿流しのあたりの研究ノートを見せてあげてもいいけれど。
Interesting. I would love to see those. Mio-san took out a notebook from her bag and flipped through it. She appeared to be doing her research thoroughly.
ありがとうございます。お借りできるものなら後でゆっくり読んでみたいと思います。
本当は閲覧厳禁の秘密ノートだけれどね。研究の同志になら特別に見せてあげてもいいわね。
Mio-san handed me the notebook a bit hesitantly. It looked like it'd take a whole night to finish reading. It was densely packed with information. I saw copies of various documents and quotes in there too. It wasn't just some delusion of hers.
一番最初にミオさんは言いましたよね。毎年の事件で一人がたたりで死に、一人が生贄にされて失踪すると。
A person is sacrificed and disappears. Satoshi-kun had gone missing. Did he become a sacrifice? What is a sacrifice anyway? Mio-san looked pleased to hear my question again. She took out another notebook and handed it to me. Another one?
読めばわかるけど、かいつまんで話すわね。お社様のたたりとは、簡単に言えば、お社様の怒りのこと。お社様が怒ったら、罰としてたたりが起こる。それはわかるわよね。
Right.
一応わかります。ダム戦争で村に敵対した人間たちにお社様が怒り、たたりが起こったと、そう言いたいわけですよね。
そうね。でね、お社様のたたりというのは放置してはいけないの。もっともっと大きなたたりを招くからね。だから神職である古出家の歴代当主たちは、お社様のたたりがあるたびにそのお怒りを鎮めるために生贄を捧げる必要があったの。それを生贄の儀と呼ぶみたいなんだけどね。
じゃあつまり毎年綿流しの日にお社様のたたりで一人死んで、そのたたりを鎮めるためにさらにもう一人を生贄にして殺してると、そういうんですか？
That's the idea, at least. I don't personally buy it at this point.
でも一人しか死んでませんよ、現実に。
So what happens to the other?
生贄に捧げられたなんて聞いたこともない。
死体が出ないのは当然よ。だって生贄の儀式は犠牲者を鬼ヶ淵の沼に沈めることなんだもの。あの沼は一度沈めば二度と浮き上がることはないと言われる底なしの沼。死体なんて出ようはずもない。
じゃあ毎年のもう一人の犠牲者はみんな沼の底に沈んでると？
Does that mean Satoshi-kun is also the bottom of that dark green swamp?
さあ、本当に沼の底に沈められているかはわからないわ。でも連続事件を起こしている人たちがそれを意識して一人を消していることは間違いないと思うわね。
Now that's an interesting sentence, because that is... I could believe that. Whoever is responsible for this is eliminating one person based on that legend, and I think they could be basically dooming them to being killed, or like to dying or disappearing beforehand through some, like the curse itself. Which could be like what explains why they kill and why they vanish. Each year a traitor to the village dies on the day of Watanagashi because of Oyashiro-sama's curse, and another person is sacrificed in order to pacify Oyashiro-sama's anger. A person's body will never be found because he or she is supposedly thrown into the bottomless swamp.
そう。つまりひなみ沢村連続開始事件というのはたたりとそれを鎮めるための生贄の2つでセットになったもの。そしてそれを毎年繰り返すことによってダム戦争時の旧敵を毎年2人ずつ殺していけるシステムのことを指しているの。
I mean, does that really? I don't. How does that apply to the first and last years? Because years like 2 through 4. I mean, that makes sense, right? The Hojo mom, potentially like the priest's wife, I guess, can kind of count, and maybe Satoshi. Like, I don't know. It doesn't feel as much like the second person is a traitor.
私の話は省略しすぎてるからね。多分ちょっと信じがたいとは思う。だからこそあなたに預けた研究ノートをね、内容を理解できたなら、私の話がそういい加減なものでもないことがわかるはず。
I heard a man's voice just then. A middle-aged man with a hat was waving at Mio-san from the entrance.
ごめんなさい。待ち人が来たみたい。
Tamatake?
もっとゆっくり話がしたかったのに。でも機会はまだこれからもあるでしょうしね。そのノートはそれまで預けておくわね。中身をよく読んで理解できたなら、私のいい話し相手になってくれるのを楽しみにしているわね。
Mio-san wrapped up the conversation and headed to where the man was waiting for her. She left her old notebooks in my hands. Mio-san waved at me as she left the library with her companion. I took a seat again and opened what she'd given me. What bugged me was the series of mysterious deaths, also known as the Curse of Oyashiro-sama. Maybe I'd be able to get closer to the truth by reading these notebooks. Maybe. If I studied them carefully, I might be able to find out who was really behind the incidents. Why did Satoshi-kun have to disappear? What was he involved in? How did that happen? Maybe Takano's notes would bring me the answer. Research notes, Mio Takano. I started flipping the pages, this time making sure that no one was watching over my shoulder. I'm gonna skip all of it. Maybe they'll recap the interesting stuff. Or no, it's just like a little time skip. It was time for the library to close. I had to leave. I bought some food on my way home. I shut my door and I locked it right away. Then I heard the door of the neighboring apartment open. Kasai lived next door. Nobody else lived on this floor of the nearly empty apartment building anyway. I clearly heard the door open and close. Kasai must have noticed that I came home and was coming over because he wanted to talk to me. I unlocked the door and shouted out to him.
カサイなの？鍵は開いてますよ。カサイさんじゃないよ。シオン。
Oh, hell no. Lock the door. That voice. I twitched.
入るよ。どうぞ、おね。
The door slowly opened. My alter ego, Mion Sonozaki, appeared. She was holding a box of cake, while smiling timidly. You made me rip out my fingernails. Like, here's some cake. Look, I know that was one of those things where, realistically, Mion couldn't have done anything besides that, given the position she was in, or that's how she feels, at least. But Shion's not a person who is very driven by that logic of, like, duty to the family, it seems. And I wouldn't be shocked if she holds a grudge. While smiling timidly.
どうぞ上がってって言うまで玄関に突っ立ってるつもりですか？どうぞ上がって。
Maybe not. I mean, maybe, like, she still fears her, but, like...
全然可愛くない部屋で申し訳ないけどね。
I don't know, maybe she gets it. And
落ち着いた雰囲気のとこだね。
maybe she doesn't have super hard feelings, but I don't know. I kind of have struggled to believe it. Sis looked a bit tense when entering my room. It was her first time here.
生活はどう？新しい学校はやっぱりつまらないです。一応通ってはいますけど、気分が乗らないときはサボらせてもらってます。全寮制だとなかなかそうはいかないですからね。センルチはやっぱり辛かったか。チェ、お姉も一度閉じ込められてみろってんです。ごめんごめん。ケーキ買ってきたからさ、食べよ。
Mion opened the box. I saw 2 cheesecakes there. We have the same taste in food, so we don't have to fight if we get 2 of the same thing. I chatted with her over the cheesecake. I talked to her about school and whatnot.
必要な家具とかがあったら言ってね。融通できるかもしれないから。この部屋にもようやく馴染んできたとこだけど、近いうちに引き払うかもしれないから、家具はノーサンキューです。
To our knowledge, that doesn't happen, right? I assume this is the same apartment. They make it, like, given the things like Kasai being the only one who lives on the floor, it seems to me like it's the same one.
うちのお父さんが沖宮に住むつもりなら戻ってこいってうるさいんですよ。お父さんに会いたくないんだけど、かといって逆らうのも怖いしな。 お父さんもシオンがいなくなって寂しそうだったから、なんだかんだ言っても帰ってきたら喜ぶと思うよ。チェー、人事だと思って。
Come to think of it, this is the first time I talked to Sin since I was allowed to live as Shion Sonozaki. She didn't look like how she was at the Sonozaki house that day. The successor of the Sonozaki family and my twin sister are two different people. The demon lives inside the leader of the Sonozakis. Our bodies are exactly the same, except for the tattoo of a demon on her back. Mion's destiny as the successor was set in stone when she got that tattoo. It's pretty simple. The Mion from that night was different from the Mion before me. When I was forced to tear off my fingernails, I'd momentarily despised her. But if I were the next leader of the family, I'd have done the same. Okay, maybe she...
Shion.
Okay, so maybe... I don't want to say she's over it, but she just understands that Mion was just doing what she had to do, right, as the Sonozaki successor.
爪は治った？もうすっかり傷口は塞がったからね。最近は目立つのがかえって嫌なんで、包帯みたいなのもしてないです。でもまだだいぶいびつでね。あまり人には見せられないかな。
I sneered at her, displaying my incomplete fingernails. Mion grew quiet and looked down.
謝らなくていいよ。ミオンだって、あそこは仕方なかったんだからさ。次期当主の役割を演じただけ。恨んじゃいないから。ごめんね。オッケー。その謝罪で私は全部チャラにした。でも、もう一度謝ったらそれは取り消し。一生許さないよ。何それ。お姉は一度謝りモードに入るとなかなか抜けられない悪い癖がありますからね。私の方で区切らないとキリがないんです。本当に許してくれるの？サトシとのことも。
My heart ached when she mentioned his name. It felt just like the ache of an old wound.
シオンがサトシのことを好きなのはもちろん知ってたんだよ。あれだけ大勢の前で熱愛宣言しちゃいましたからね。なんだか今更恥ずかしくもなんともないや。でもバッチャはあれで本当にけじめがついたと思ってるんだよ。シオンがちゃんと自分でけじめをつけてみせたから、それで全部終わりって。そうでなきゃ困ります。あれだけ痛い思いしたんですから。サトシ、どこに行ったんだろうね。
See, and that's the question. Does Mion genuinely not know? I started choking when I heard her say that. I just said it to her myself. I said that I'd forgiven her completely, but that promise instantly evaporated. Just because of what she said, I felt like it turned into a completely different person. What did you just say, Mion? Did you say, I wonder where Satoshi-kun disappeared to? Who else can know other than you and your folks? What did you say? Where did he go? I felt my eyeballs reddening in anger. It felt as though they were about to pop. I choked on a burning sensation in my throat. Mion's expression rapidly changed. It looked like she noticed the devil's mask on my face. We were one and the same. We could understand each other's thoughts without voicing them, so showing our expressions was like unveiling everything in our hearts to the other.
ごめん。
Even though I told her not to apologize anymore, Mion apologized. I felt like strangling her. I was going to make her confess where she'd hid Satoshi-kun. If she told me she threw him into the Ongafuchi swamp, I'd strangle her to death right then and there.
サトシのことは本当に知らないの。
That's a lie.
本当。
Why does it sound like she's struggling to say this? Is like, did she actually put her hands on Mion?
バッ
She's
チャだ
not
って
even
何も
realizing?
知らない。本当なの。嘘だ嘘だ嘘だ。じゃあ本当にお社様のたたりで鬼隠しにあったとでも言うつもりなのか。たたりなんてあるもんか。たたりなんてあるもんか。
Words kept coming out of my mouth like I was chanting a spell. I wasn't speaking by my own will anymore. It was the demon who was controlling me. The demon that had been sleeping deep inside me woke up and was speaking through my mouth. My hands, I mean the demon's hand, grabbed Mion by the neck. God, I knew it.
お前たちがサトシ君を鬼隠しにしたんだ。お前たちその先本家が、お前たちが返して、私のサトシ君を返して。
My hand slowly but surely squeezed Mion's neck. Mion put her hands onto mine. I looked at her fingers. 3 of the fingernails on her left hand looked as ugly as mine. Oh, shit. What? What? Yo, what?
ミオ、これは。
What
どうしたの？
did she have to atone for? Tears rolled down her cheeks. She didn't have to answer. She had the same scars as I did. She atoned as well. Was it the same thing? The way those wounds were healing looked the same as mine. So did she get those wounds around the same time as I did?
シオンだけが爪を剥がされるなんてかわいそすぎるんだもん。
Is it really? God. I almost... Part of me, like, deep down is like, she's lying, right? Like, she had to atone for something else, but, like, I don't know, man. I want to believe it right now. Mion started sobbing. I stood there, petrified, still wringing Mion's neck.
シオンがね、サトシのことを好きだって分かって、私、シオンとサトシに幸せになってほしかったんだよ。だって、シオンばっかり、いつもかわいそうで、私たちは同じ双子なのに、なんでシオンばっかり、いつも差別されて。
She's coming back a little bit. It didn't come as a surprise to me that Mion might also have loved Satoshi-kun as I did. I've always liked the same stuff, and even the same people. She was stupid enough to feel obligated towards someone like me.
私ね、バッチャにね、怒鳴って言ったんだよ。シオンとサトシをそっとしてあげてほしいって。そしたら、けじめをつけたら見逃そうっていう話になって。だからね、ちゃんとシオンが頑張ったから、もうね、二人は普通に過ごしてもよかったんだよ。なのに、サトシいなくなっちゃった。
Look, unless she's a masterful liar. I don't know, I can kind of believe her.
こんなのひどいよね。
But God. It almost makes you wonder, does anything actually change? Is the theory from before that he disappeared because of the curse kind of having like a timer almost? Like, is that what makes the most sense? Mion isn't smart enough to shed crocodile tears. Those tears were real. Her tears dissolved my demon's anger like how the sun melts ice. I do also gotta wonder, is the reason that Shion is like a certified crash out, is it... I don't know how to like explain this. Like what if she has the demon, right? Like whatever the curse is, right? I've assumed it's a parasite, but like what if she has it, right? And has for a while. Her tears dissolved my demon's anger like how the sun melts ice.
信じて、シオン。本当にサトシがどうしていなくなってしまったのか。園崎家とかバッチャとか、本当にそういうのは何も関わってないの。バッチャはシオンのけじめで全てを許した。だからサトシに何かするなんて絶対にないの。ミオ、ごめん、苦しかった。
I took my hands off her neck and held her instead.
苦しくなんかないよ。シオンはもっともっと苦しかったんだよね。
Perhaps. I shouted at the demon in my mind. I believed in Mion. I had been convinced it was the Sonozaki family that made Satoshi-kun disappear. But Mion denied it, while shedding tears. Between her and me, her tears are more convincing than any words. So I'd believe in her. It absolutely wasn't the Sonozaki family that made him disappear. So, do you really think that Satoshi-kun disappeared because of Oyashiro-sama's curse? This little bloodshot, like, CG, I almost wonder if this is, like... I mean, it's obviously indicative of their mental state, but I mean in the literal, like... Is this indicative that the demon is starting to influence them? Right? If I believe that's what it really is. I don't believe in curses, and Mion didn't do it. It wasn't the curse of the Sonozaki family who demoned him away. Like, you can't tell me, like, the separate, like, the italics, right? As well as this kind of sounding like a question and a response. A question and a response. It sounds like a conversation in her head, right? Dude, like, I seriously, like... Parasite theory makes sense to me. I don't know. I just know it's not Mion. It's not the Sonozaki family because Mion says so. That's stupid, Shion. Are you going to ignore Satoshi-kun's voice? I know. You don't have to remind me, demon. I can hear his voice. And she's literally saying, like, you don't have to remind me, demon. Like, I think she knows. And if you listen, like, at one point, like, right, where was it? Right around, right around here. Okay, I don't actually know where it is. But somewhere around here, like, I shouted at the demon in my mind, right? Like, dude, I think she knows, right, that there's something there, and we're just not seeing that. But let's keep going. I don't want to kill the pacing of this scene. I'll talk about all my thoughts on this after. I know. You don't have to remind me, demon. I can hear his voice. I know he's mumbling with an ambivalent expression, like he always used to do, even though he knows help won't come. I'll help him no matter what. I'll save him if he's alive. I'll avenge him if he's dead. But Mion didn't do it. You just want to take it out on somebody. It doesn't matter who. But I'm Shion, not a demon. You're only a part of me. Don't try to take control. Fuck off. Don't ever show up again. She's snapping or snapping out of it. The demon faded away. My body went limp, and I fell to the floor while holding Mion.
Shion, 大丈夫? もう大丈夫だよ。ミオン、私たちはどうしてミオンとシオンなんだろうね。どうして同じ一人であってはいけないんだろうね。やめなよ。私たちはもう何度もそれを自問してきたよ。でも答えなんか出ない。現実に私とあなたはミオンとシオン。それが現実。私ね、自分がミオンでもシオンでも、私たちは私たち。公平な関係でいたいのに。仕方がないよ。ミオンの背中には鬼が宿ってる。闘志を継ぐ定めが宿ってる。それは仕方がない。私、嫌だ。鬼なんかいらない。鬼なんかいらない。私は鬼じゃない。鬼じゃない。同じ人間なのがいい。
Dude, the roles seem reversed. I'm gonna be honest. Despite the fact that Mion obviously acts as the successor, I'm not sure we've ever properly seen a single time where she is like a certified crash out. Like Shion. And if I think that's because Shion has a demon, I don't know, that's kind of weird. I'm just saying. Right? I kind of entertained this idea in my notes. I didn't really have anything off of it, but I almost wondered if, like, Shion was actually originally the successor, if that makes sense. Right? Like, if the successor is who gets the demon, I feel like Shion has it. Like, we've seen so much to indicate that she does. Right? But, like, obviously Mion has taken the role. But, like, I don't know. Did things get switched somewhere? That's something I've wondered about. I'm not sure if that makes a ton of sense, but that part's maybe not super duper important, just knowing that Shion seems to have some kind of demon, and it honestly doesn't really look like Mion does. Mion is a demon, and Shion is a human. Even though we're twins, there's a difference between us. Was it impossible for humans to live with demons after all? It should be possible, because they did it before. That's the legend of Hinamizawa. Humans and demons lived in harmony together, as Oyashiro-sama watched over them. Mion, Shion, Satoshi-kun. Demons, humans. Oyashiro-sama's curse, the series of mysterious deaths. Satoshi-kun's disappearance. We fell asleep while holding each other, while holding everything. Interesting. I want to see what the tips are for this chapter, and then definitely got to talk a little bit. I know I talk a lot during the chapter itself, so most of my thoughts are maybe already known at this point. Ooh! We got a triple! 50, 64, and 85. We're jumping around a lot, huh? Let's see what notebook page 50 has for us. I saw Mio Takano a few times after that. At her core, she was fascinated with the bizarre. She had an insatiable curiosity that was just as strong. I have to remind myself not to take her story too seriously, otherwise I might start believing that Satoshi-kun disappeared because of the curse. She talks about the dark history of Hinamizawa a lot. It's all very interesting. Her theories are based on nothing but conjecture, but some of her intuition covers facts that only members of the Sonozaki family would know. She thinks that Uyashiro-sama's curse is a continuation of these ancient rituals. In other words, she believes that the curse is performed by religious fanatics. According to her theory, a religious cult once existed in Hinamizawa, and the three families stemmed from it. She believes that they are operating behind the scenes in order to revive the dignity of the Onigafuchi people, which was lost during the Meiji era. Mio-san's theories are far-reaching, and looking at them on a larger scale, they end up making a lot of sense, but they can't offer any explanation for Satoshi-kun's disappearance when using them on a smaller one. Her theories are just too broad. I can kind of believe that. Notebook page 64. This kind of looks different. Does that indicate anything important? I'm gonna view all tips. Are they always purple? No. They switch the color up just for the sake of it. I mean, maybe there's something to what those colors mean, though. I'd have to look a little more in depth. Page 64. I exchanged information with Oishi every now and then. We'd each expect new leads from each other, but neither of us had any luck. I no longer believed that the tip that Satoshi-kun might have headed to Tokyo. It was very clearly bogus anyway. Although I can't befriend Oishi, he's been fair about the deal. He alone has been serious about uncovering any new information. Oishi's sources are quite reliable, so whenever I found some dubious tip, I checked with him to see if it was valid. My meetings with him have diminished in frequency since he's been assigned to new cases. Eventually, we stopped meeting entirely. Oishi stopped investigating, and I reached the limits of my sources of information. People now think that Satoshi-kun's disappearance was a supernatural phenomenon called demoning away. In Hinamizawa, they refer to his disappearance as him having transferred, and nobody will talk about it otherwise. I don't like the way that phrase is used to erase him. Yeah. So that kind of... It's interesting because it kind of resolves the Oishi thing that we saw today, right? Let's check out page 85, though, in the meantime. During the upheaval surrounding Oyashiro-sama's curse in 1982, I was pulled this way and that by new leads on Satoshi-kun's disappearance. Every time I found new information that looked promising, I kept changing my theories. When was this written? In 1982 makes me think it's after 1983, or she would have just said last year. I mean, I guess you could be specific, but that also became an incredible burden on me. It wore me down plenty on its own. The fatigue was harsh, but it also provided a very kind acceptance. Bit by bit, it soothed away the anger, sadness, and doubt that wore me down. I'll never forget Satoshi-kun. I'll never try to forget him and move on. I constantly repeated those to myself in my head. I repeated them to keep my memories of Satoshi-kun from fading too, over and over. For the sake of my fond memories of Satoshi-kun, together with my fear and my sadness, I repeated them forever and ever. That one... I'm not entirely sure what to make of this one. So it definitely seems like this one was written in the future. Every time she found information that looked promising, she changed her theories, but that became a burden on her, wore her down. But eventually, it wearing her down, provided a kind of acceptance that wore away the negative emotions, and she promised she'd never forget him, and just constantly repeated those to keep the memory from fading. And she repeated them forever. Interesting, and it was kind of, I liked the fading effect in the background there. So that one was a little interesting. I'm not entirely sure what to make of that, other than this was maybe written in the future. But this one kind of talks about Takano. And how she has her theories, and they're a little too broad. They don't get very specific. Which is interesting, because I agree. It doesn't really explain anything on an individual level. Could it maybe explain some general motivations? Maybe. It could maybe explain things like that, but they're so broad, it doesn't really give you anything specific about any individual case, right? And it's not the greatest framework. And I think that would make sense, especially if she's potentially involved, right? I don't know, why would she give you anything specific, right? This one was interesting because, like I said, it kind of tied a bow on the the whole her meeting with Oishi and them exchanging information thing. They never really found anything. She personally eventually believed the Tokyo tip was bogus. But it kind of implies, like, the interesting thing that it implies, like, to me at least, is that she doesn't end up hating Oishi all that much, right? And she can cooperate with him, which is interesting because I don't remember my evidence for this. But one of the reasons that I suspected that that it was Shion in chapter 2 and not Mion was because, in my words, I said her hatred of Oishi was less intense. And again, I don't really remember anything specific that made that true in chapter 2, but it's interesting to see that that is actually kind of true, it seems, right? She seems to have a somewhat decent relationship with Oishi. They're not friends or anything, but, like, they can at least work alongside each other when when it mutually benefits them, right? So that's interesting. So I guess maybe let's talk about this episode, or like this chapter in the episode as a whole. So, I mean, this one was interesting. This was a long episode. I'm trying to remember the exact cutoff point. It was after. So this is when episode is when we got the revelation about Satoshi being missing. That's what this was. Which, I mean, is something we saw coming, right? Like, wait, was that this episode? Was it or this chapter? Or was that last chapter? I don't remember. I guess ultimately it's not too important in the grand scheme of things if I discuss things that happened a little earlier. But I mean, like, Satoshi disappeared. We knew this was coming. Shion obviously didn't take this super well. She switched her theories so many times. She started off by believing that it, like, I don't know, she definitely didn't buy at first that he disappeared and ran away. And then she kind of accepted that maybe it was the Sonozakis, because that was kind of Oishi's theory, that the Sonozakis, like, were like, yeah, you gotta skip town, buddy. Like, that's just how it is, right? We'll watch over Satoko, you gotta go, right? Like, and so he left, right? And there were tips that maybe indicated the truth in this. And now that I think about it, actually, this was definitely last chapter, because we had tips that indicated this. But so that's where things get interesting in this chapter. Because I think did this chapter just start with us, like, meeting Takano? I think it did. I think this chapter was the library section, and then the Mion at the apartment section. So we meet Takano, which is really interesting. She was reading over our notes, and oh goodness, I don't remember the exact, like, of what she was saying at the time, but I know. Oh no, okay. She was basically saying that the killings were connected, but that the individual that was killing in these cases maybe is getting influenced. And this is when she gets interrupted by Takano, which is interesting because I've already pointed out, like said in the past, that if someone's influencing these killings, which I think is the case, right, that I think it's her, right? And so her just peeping over the shoulder, like, is kind of interesting there, right? And exchanging notes. And maybe the notes are intended to throw her off, right? Like, maybe she was closer before, right? And the more broad ideas kind of threw her off a little bit. And so she had this talk with Takano, and they kind of exchanged information, where Takano kind of starts to talk about the past of the village as a whole, and how the sacrifices are the big one, and kind of puts that idea into her head, which is interesting. And it might not be completely wrong, honestly, despite me saying it could be to throw her off. The idea that it's sacrifices, but maybe sacrifices chosen beforehand and influenced by someone, right? Like I said, maybe you're put on a timer, basically, right? When you're chosen. But I think the really, really interesting scene, like, that was interesting enough, and she got, like, the notes, and we might, maybe next time we play, see more of these. The really interesting thing, though, was the next part with Mion showing up. And and Shion, she snaps, right? She's literally choking Mion, right? And the notable thing, and this is what I mentioned, she is literally talking about like a demon in her head. She's having a conversation with it. She's like saying like, you can't take control right now, right? Like, do not, right? And like, I'm kind of wondering if this is like literal, not like the demon in her head is her just losing her cool, right? I've already kind of wondered this whole parasite theory, right? Like being like maybe influencing people and like really drumming up your negative emotions somehow and taking control and killing and whatnot, right? Like I said, I think I've maybe indicated this before, but I wouldn't be shocked if these are the demons that are mentioned in Hinamizawa lore, right? That cooperate with humans in like in a case like this, right? And they're what gets you to snap, right? But she snapped and she kind of brought herself out of it, and it like physically wore her down, and that was just so interesting. And so the interesting part is that, like I said, we've never really seen this from Mion. So if I actually believe that this is the parasite and this is what the Sonozaki heir gets, you almost gotta wonder, right? Is there something up with that? Right? I know that sounds ridiculous because Mion's very obviously the Sonozaki heir, but like, I don't know. Is this all some crazy ruse? Like, what if it's actually Shion, right? Or was in the past, and maybe she was going to be the heir and then, like, wasn't anymore because of something with the Dam War, was, I think, my initial thought. But, like, I don't know. Like, the point is, like, she really seems to have that demon to me despite not having the tattoo, right? And I mean, it would explain why she's so prone to these violent and angry outbursts that we see from Shion a lot. It's really interesting. And like, I feel like I've said this so many times, just Shion's role, I think it's a lot bigger than right now the game leads you to believe, right? I really believe that. Ooh, man, I mean, that's like most of my thoughts on this chapter. This was a really good one. So much went down. The punishment, the disappearance, the arrival of Takano, and that demon. That is 4, like, banger scenes back to back to back to back, right? Like, just, I mean, crazy sequence, honestly. Might be one of the single best episodes that, like, of the series so far. I don't exactly have a tier list for which episodes or moments were the best, but this was a really good one, I thought. I'm super excited to see where this chapter goes from here, because it's not over, right? I assume we've got a little longer left. I don't know how much longer a little longer is, but we've probably got a long jump skip to, like, Keiichi showing up at some point, right? He's mentioned at the very beginning of the chapter as he will appear, right? And so I'm just curious, when is that going to be? Is that going to be soon? What's his role going to be? Are we going to see one of the scenarios from, like, chapters 1 through 3? Is one of them going to play out and maybe we see Shion's role in it? That would be super interesting. If we got to see chapter 2 or 3 play out in particular, right? Chapter 1 would be interesting too. But chapters 2 or 3, seeing Shion's role in particular in chapter 2 would be huge. And same with chapter 3, because I've already mentioned, I think she has a big role in chapter 3, potentially, and it's just not being shown right now. Chapter 1, I don't really know what she would see. Maybe she would kind of see this whole situation with Keiichi and kind of start drawing parallels, and, right, maybe it would impact her thoughts on things, but I'm not sure how that would happen, but I am actually so intrigued to see where they go from this, so I'm hoping to play again soon, probably tomorrow. It's Saturday. I have off Sunday and Monday, so nothing's stopping me. So I'll probably play again by tomorrow. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I enjoyed this episode so much. I hope you guys enjoyed it as much as I did. But that'll be all for me. Whenever the next episode comes out, I really hope to see you guys there, because like I said, I'm super excited for it, so I hope you guys are as well. But until then, peace.